All right, what's going on, everybody? Take number 2, which I just record, but I wasn't recording. Son of a bitch. But hey, ceremonial witchcraft. Mobile broadcasting for now. Anyways, I am on the move to my wife's work. Actually, I'm recording this, and it'll be live later from a stationary position. But still, I'm going to pretend as if I'm in the moment. This is what happens in the past. What you do in the present can affect your past and affect your future. Kind of like that. So that's what I'm doing right now. Manipulating the present, and it's going to be in the past soon when I put it in the future. Fucking wrap your head around that fucking shit. Yes, sir. It's a tough thing to wrap your head around. But anyways, so here we go. My wife, if anybody watched the Instagram thing that I put on saying what the title was going to be about here today, what my episode was going to be about, then they know it's going to be Gregg Braden versus Jordan Peterson. And that's not actually like they're getting into a fight or anything like that, or I'm going to take one side or the other, or I'm going to have a hypothetical argument, although I may. But anyways, if they watch the Instagram thing I put on, they know that what I'm about to talk about is what I just mentioned. However, I also said I had to go bring my wife for lunch and drop off my baby at daycare because she didn't go to daycare on Monday because Veterans Day, my wife had it off. So I kept her home to spend time with her. And then on Tuesday, after I came home from working the Sunday night shift and then the Monday night shift, I didn't get much sleep. Yeah, but my baby was home, and she knew I was home, so I couldn't really leave. I wanted to play with her, and then I ended up staying up all day. And I ended up getting sick and strep throat bullshit, so I didn't go to work last night, which kind of sucks. But at the same time, my boss was very understanding. I told him I'd bring in the doctor's note and the medication and all that, because penicillin they would give me, which I fucking hate taking penicillin, but it is what it is. I also said that I couldn't, in that Instagram thing, that I'm not a big fan, but I did magic to heal myself, which I think helped because one day of penicillin ended up giving me all the results of my glands. They were swollen. My uvula was swollen. Both glands are swollen, and now it's already down. But because I hadn't been sleeping, all the instructions I put in my subconscious to do the magical healing, when you sleep, your subconscious takes over, and a lot of healing happens. That's why people say, so you grow in your sleep, you heal in your sleep. Well, that's the reason. Your subconscious takes over. So if you could put in a healing program or suggestion, then it's gonna play out. And I hadn't done that. But anyways, so I was with my wife her lunch. So she was off Monday, and because she was off Monday, it's because Veterans Day. It was a holiday here, not Veterans Day, sorry. Remembrance Day, rather, was a holiday here in Canada, and only certain governmental people, because schools are open, but her job was closed. And, she's the only kind of government job that should be paying taxes. But people don't know that. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom says that very specifically. Actually, I believe even in the States and London's charter, not called the Charter of Rights and Freedom, actually maybe. I don't know. But anyways, the equivalent of the Constitution in the States, this Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, the equivalent of that in London, they all say the same thing. Only government people should be paying taxes, basically. That's paraphrasing, mind you. It's not stated like that. But when you break down the fucking jargon they use, the words they use, it ends up being that. But most people don't know that, and they do it voluntarily. Half because, or partially because, you hear stories about like Al Capone getting caught because of tax evasion, and they wrap it up to that. Well, he didn't pay his taxes, so they caught him on that. Well, this motherfucker ran from the law. So what? He went to do his taxes all of a sudden, they nabbed him? Is that what you're saying? Okay, well that makes maybe some sense. He went to H&R Block and then to get a fucking refund, and then they grabbed him. But that's not through tax evasion. If that's the story, they nabbed him on that premise. And even the story of the one that fucking Johnny Depp played there. I can't remember the fucking name, but he played in a few mobster movies, and not Blow. I'm not talking about the one. It's like a gang in New York kind of film. But anyways, they say the same thing about him getting caught for fucking tax evasion and all that. It's bullshit. It's absolute bullshit, okay? Because when it comes to Al Capone's case, they added tax evasion when they caught the motherfucker on there, okay? But it was the kind of tax evasion that I got when I was moving smuggled cigarettes. I didn't actually get caught for smuggling or even trafficking a fucking product like, because tobacco is not illegal to sell or move or grow. It's not illegal. But what's illegal is I was distributing it to somebody who was selling it illegally and not paying the taxes on it. That's the type of tax evasion Capone got. It's not what people think it is. And this is not what I'm supposed to talk about today, but just want to shed a little bit of light and just show people how fucking well-read I am in so many different subjects. But it's just bullshit that people go to jail for not paying their fucking taxes. And they try to say these mobsters that fucking ran from the cops from these huge crimes got caught somehow through tax evasion. Like, oh, that gave us the reason to bust in his door because he didn't pay his taxes? Are you fucking kidding me? That is the biggest crock of shit I've ever heard. But it's useful for them to make people think you gotta pay your taxes, you gotta go do your income tax every year and this bullshit. But really, it's only anybody working for the government that is supposed to do that. And that's how it's stated in the fucking thing, which the opposite is actually true in our society. A lot of people that are in the upper places in government get the most tax exemptions, and it's crazy because technically they're breaking the law, and we're doing things we don't even have to do. We're like volunteering to pay taxes, so these people can be tax exempt. It makes no sense. But anyway, that's all I want to talk about today, because I can ramble about that on and on. My God, more fucking cutting down trees. I fucking absolutely hate this. My town is cutting down so many trees right near my house. I went live, and I said this before, trying to get my wife to come out with me at night, and I took all the signs down on all these trees they were going to cut down in the middle of the night. They already had them marked, unfortunately, and they ended up cutting them down anyways, and I just see more cutting down. So, as a side note to today's lesson, if you own property, if you own your own fucking land, if you're in Canada, put up pine trees, babies, the Christmas trees, the roots don't get as big, they don't get as large, and they last all year round. But, what I'm trying to say is plant some fucking trees to make up for all the fucking trees we're losing. If you're one of those people going out talking about how bad it is they cut down trees and all the bad shit they're doing to our society, well, don't just talk about it. Don't just say shit. Go do something about it and then say, this is what I did to help, and do your part. Put some fucking trees on your property. Put as many as you can. And if you don't own your property, if you're renting, well, maybe plant one or two, see if your landlord notices. And when they do notice, say, I don't fucking know. You know those little spinny things that come down from maple trees and different things like that? Well, if those go in the ground and get water, they can turn into a tree. So you can use that as your fucking excuse. And it's definitely legit. But anyways, that's not the point today, too. What's going on, everybody? I want to do an episode about Jordan Peterson versus Gregg Braden. Once again, that's not them fighting or going against each other one-on-one or anything, although that would be a hell of a show.
Experiment again and again and again, and every time the results were the same. In fact, they were able to determine how many people it takes to feel peace for peace to happen in that area. Here's what they found. Very small number. They said if you can get the square root of 1% of your population to feel peace, peace will happen. What does that number look like? Let me show you the map. These are very small numbers. The square root of 1% of the population. If you have a city of 1 million people, how many people are in Milan? Do we know? Approximately? 5 million? So, okay. Yeah, well. So, muchos personas, right? Okay, if you have a city of 1 million people, here's how the formula works. You take the number of people, total number of people, multiply it by 1%, so 1 million times 0.01 gives you the number 10,000. Okay? Now you take the square root of 10,000, 100 people.
All right. And that tonight is an episode about Gregg Braden's philosophy and Jordan Peterson's philosophy, which on the surface might seem like different philosophies. And, you know, they do have different ways of going about their philosophy, you know, very superficially and just, you know, taking what you would see at a first glance, let's just say. Jordan Peterson would be more like, you know, you want to help fix your life, self-improve your life, well, start by cleaning your fucking room and walking around with your back straight and thinking about your purpose and what you want out of life, and, you know, ask for what you want and start taking action towards what you want, right? Which, you know, falls in line with the magic, fucking trees being cut down. God, I can't drive by there without seeing that, and it just irks me. But anyways, that philosophy goes in line with a lot of shit that Frederick Xavier says, right? You need to add action to what you're manifesting. He says you can manifest something without even leaving your home. He's done it. The sigil ball, right? The orange sigil. Anybody who watches the Minded Magic series on YouTube knows that you can manifest a ball in your yard, an orange ball in your yard, by using the sigil he puts within the first few episodes of the Minded Magic series, or the Mystery School series, sorry. There's a sigil. You copy that down, you charge it, you do all the sigil laws, even if you don't, because, like, I never even did the whole jerk off residual thing at that time yet. I free charged it and meditated on it until it blended in. I couldn't see it anymore. I did that a few times, like pre-charging it, and it happened for me. I had a fucking orange fucking Nerf football in my yard that was not my children's. So you can manifest something without action. However, the bigger thing you want to manifest, whether it's a big amount of money or a big job or whatever, without doing action for that, it's going to take a lot longer. And what you manifest, if you don't actually take action or go out and do anything, it's going to be a lot weaker than what you potentially could get. So you do need that action to your manifestation. So what he's saying is, responsibility is how you make your life meaningful. If you have no meaning in your life, if you can't find meaning in your life and all that, let's say you get into magic because your life is shit and you want to change and all that, well, you can't just start casting for a great fucking CEO executive job when you're working in a warehouse. It doesn't matter if you have a criminal record or have your grade 12. You're going to need to take steps to possibly get your grade 12 and then get some more education under your belt if you want that big job. Not one of those is just going to fall in your lap. However, if you cast for it, ask the universe for it in the right fucking way, plus those actions, it's more likely to happen, right? And you may not have to follow through. You probably have to get your grade 12, but you may not have to do anything more than that while you're doing that. If you show the universe that you're serious about it, or your God, whoever your deity is, then there's a good chance you're gonna attain those things. So that would be like Jordan Peterson's philosophy, which totally goes in line with my magic and everything I learned. Now, Gregg Braden's philosophy, especially over the last little bit when I'm talking about the Divine Matrix video, that was, I think it was in 2007 that he put out. So he's been putting out this stuff for a while, before the 2012 mark threshold, but he was one of those people that didn't believe in the end of the world was 2012 or anything bad was going to happen in 2012, but he did know that it was the end of an age. The Mayan calendar ended, and he's done a lot of research on earlier civilizations before the Mayans. Most people think the Mayans are the earliest civilization, but he knows, and I've done research, so I now know, as far as you can trust the researching, the authorities behind those, that there are earlier civilizations. There's things that are stuck in ice right now. There are things underwater that date longer than the Mayan culture that, isn't underwater and stuff like that. So therefore, it's pretty evident to say, just going by what I said, without any of the scientific jargon and babble, that those civilizations stuck under the ice and under the water are older than than the Mayan civilizations, because of the fact that, that water's been there for a long time, and that ice, you can actually date things by how much the thickness of ice. I talked about this before from Gregg Braden. So going by how thick the ice is tells you how long it's been there through the science and the math of how long it takes ice to freeze at certain temperatures, and going by the temperatures of the past few years in those places. Even though it might be warming up or cooling down, you can take that trend and semi with a very great big deal of accuracy predict how often that changed, and how long it took that to stay the same, and all that would tell you how long that ice was there, and tells you that way longer than the Mayan civilization. There were civilizations before us, and they even had tools similar to ours today. Like, they use things like the elevator differently than us, but they had the technologies of elevators, and some things point to the elevator even being the same or even more advanced than ours. Our system of elevator, we use it to move us up and down. We use it for different tools. Things like escalators are all on the same principles, basically, on the mechanical way of using it, but we use it to move things and people up and down. And the way we found some of their elevator systems and all that suggests they use it for different things, some semi-similar. But point is, he's been at this for a while, Gregg Braden, and I believe because of him and his research and the New Age things that surround him, being that he comes from he was a geologist, and he's an engineer, and he was in corporations that were doing testing with bombs and nuclear shit, and he's said it in many interviews that in the 60s we were around. I'll actually play that for you later, but in the 60s, anybody who grew up in the 60s, especially in the United States, were subjugated to, or their bodies, their physical bodies, were around higher levels of radiation than the people in Fukushima, where the earthquake made the fucking nuclear power plant or whatever it was fucking explode or implode and release nuclear, toxins, waste, hazardous waste to people in that area, and they were affected. And Japan at that time did a great job of pulling together and showing how great people can be. And today Japan You know, they don't have any, I've said this before too, they don't have any natural resources, but because their business is held in almost a spiritual sense, and it's so important, business is so important, they have these rules of business that are, you know, held in like almost a spiritual sense as importance, because they share with the entire world, and they keep their word, and they have trust with everybody that the stuff they either selling to everybody is either great quality or vice versa, that the things they buy they will honor and pay, and they won't fuck you over. They have the best economy, you know, even after all that, they came out on top, and they're still doing fucking great, even though there's been still some backlash to this day from the shit from Fukushima happening. But point is, there was more radiation released in the United States, where they were testing nuclear weapons within their own borders, because it was legal, and I've seen the patents on this where it's legal for the government, you know, at least in Canada and the States, it's legal for their own government to test weapons and different things that are hazardous to our health. It's illegal to test that on different countries, but it's legal, and there's a patent for this. You can look this up, but it is legal to test things like fluoride in the water and chemtrails, chemicals in the air, and blowing up shit within your own fucking borders, within your own country, and allowing the fucking hazardous materials to be ingested and breathed in, inhaled, and, you know, absorbed by your pores with water and through the air and all these things. It's illegal to do that to your own country if it's by your own government. If it's by a different government, then that's like a fucking sign of war. That's like you declaring war on a different country. But if you do it within your own government, well, to me, it's like our government declaring war on us. They're using us as guinea pigs, and we shouldn't fucking do that. And there's been a lot of punk and alternative bands that have made songs about this in the 90s and shit, because they grew up young but seeing this stuff, and they made many songs about it. But we don't know about this. I didn't know about that. I had to look it up and see, holy fuck, he's not lying, this shit is true. So, but those rates were higher than they are now, and that should put a whole new, that should make you look at cancer stats and shit in a whole new way. Okay, not only does cancer run on stress and fear and the radiation from phones and Wi-Fi routers, but it also could have a big deal to do with, you know, all the people that lived in the 60s, or, you know, 60 years old or more right now, you know what I mean, or not, yeah, okay, yeah, 60 years old or more right now, because from 1960 to right now, from to almost to 2020, well, that's 60 years, right? So anybody over 60 lived during the 60s. Therefore, everybody who was close to retiring and older still living had the best chance of being around that time, which means they potentially could have been around those high levels of radiation and hazardous toxic waste and have a very good chance of developing cancer. Now, I know through my job and other research I did that if you somehow absorb anything that is a carcinogen, that it gets absorbed into your fat, and it doesn't necessarily go into your bloodstream, okay? Because if you absorb it through drinking, absorbing it through your skin, absorbing it however way you absorb it, okay? Whatever way that may be that you absorb it, it gets into your body and it gets stored into fat, right? This is why when you cleanse, you start losing weight, you start breaking out, and a whole bunch of other nasty things that nobody wants to happen. But it's because everything that you absorbed prior to that is in your fat cells. And whenever you start losing weight, it gets released into your bloodstream, and therefore you get the effects of all those toxic things. So it's not ideal, but that's what happens. Sorry, my drive-thru hasn't been done yet, and I got a lot of snow here, so I just had to back up through it so I didn't get stuck or wreck anything part of my front of my car. And yeah, I just got through it. Good fucking snow tires here on my fucking SUV. Fucking love it. But anyways, let me get in the house and I'll continue this where I'm going with this point. Alright, so before I continue, John Dillinger was the man I was talking about in the movie Public Enemy, which, you know, is based on a true story, but, you know, if you do a quick search, it'll say it's been mythologized or made mythical over the years. And a lot of people even say that the cop that played Christian Bale played the cop, but he actually shot himself and staged the death and all that. So you can make of that as you want. Second one is, well, I said drive through when I meant my driveway here in Canada. We don't call our driveways drive-throughs. But anyways, yeah. So going back to what I was saying about Braden, Gregg Braden, I'm trying to remember what the fuck I was just saying. I just listened to it so I could remember, and now I can't fucking remember because I switched up the subject. Okay, so yeah, I'll go back in hopes I go back a little further in hopes I hit the topic again. But he's done lots of extensive research on different cultures, and he's been in, monasteries and all this. And he brings you the true Gnostic Christian old religions from like the Egyptian monasteries, and he goes into the Tibetan monasteries and all that. And it was Japanese women doing the secret of healing on that cancer patient in the Divine Matrix. So, but fact of the matter is he went around the world and touring and having these conferences telling people how they can heal their bodies and all this. And, the main reason he was doing this, or one of the main topics he was doing this, because he didn't believe in a doomsday scenario per se, but a lot of these people were saying the thing that he feels, right? I've said it before. He even says it on, there was an interview he did with the man Lee Carroll, which is not to get confused with Carol Poke Runyons. Two different people. Lee Carroll is the man who channels the magnetic service helper named Cryon, who I listened to religiously at one point. And I still have belief and faith that is actually something going on, that he is a channeler. However, the one thing I always say about people channeling is you got to understand that anybody who channels a spirit is they actually are channeling information from somewhere else. They are actually getting the information from somewhere else, but it has to be filtered through their body. Therefore, any belief systems, any programs, and if they're not balanced or depolarized or anything like this, will have an effect on their channeling. So that means simply that if they are channeling, then anything they say or do or that comes through is going to come through the belief systems. And Lee Carroll, you can see he still has a Christian, he even talks about how he was a Jewish boy and all that. Even when Chiron is speaking, he'll talk about him being a Jewish boy and all that. So Judaism is a very strong religion, and Jewish magic from the Kabbalah is special magic and is powerful magic. I'm telling you right now because I use that brand of magic. And, a lot of its roots come from that. It's not necessarily just Jewish, but a lot of it comes from the old Gnostic Christian religions and stuff like that. I don't think I'll have time in this episode, but sometime soon I will show you via Apple Podcast. I told you before that for free, if you have an Apple phone, and I'm sure it's the same for Android phones, they have some similar thing, or maybe it is Apple Podcast on there too, but I'm sure they have some similar equivalent as Apple Podcasts, and through that you can get my podcast. My podcast is on Apple Podcasts. I listen to it through my phone normally because it's actually faster than going through Spreaker. And it gives me a hit from my name because I'm not signed up as anybody. Shh, don't tell anybody that. Don't tell people at Spreaker that. I'm not supposed to manipulate my results. But anyways, through that, you can get the Kabbalion, and every chapter is like a different law, and it's beautiful for all the Kabbalion and the Hermetic principles. But Rosicrucianism, there's a Rosicrucian fucking book on Apple Podcasts, and it's like listening to an audio book, and every chapter is actually, different things, and it's beautiful. And you'll hear in that it talks about the old Christian Gnosticism religion, which is different from Christianity completely. I forget where I was going with that, but I'll play that at some point for you. I wanted to play it because it actually has a lot to do with what I'm talking about today, but it's different. But anyway, so I forget where I was going with Cryon. But Cryon is actually, the episode, it wasn't actually Cryon interviewing Gregg Braden, but they are friends, Lee Carroll and Gregg Braden, but it was Lee Carroll himself whenever he wasn't being Cryon interviewing Gregg Braden. He talks about being a Cancer. And I've also said Birch Tree, Uncle Birch, Freak Phil, who also goes by the name of, I can't even think of his real fucking name. That's pretty fucking crazy. But anyways, he talks about how he's a Cancerian witch. Cancer is a water sign. We know that. And then I talked about Mind and Magic, how he talks about his Scorpio side, and his Pisces sign. And he's I think his ascendant is either Pisces or it's Scorpio, or I think he said he has his Mars in Scorpio and Pisces is ascendant. So therefore, those two water signs, he has both of them. And for me, my Cancer
in Cancer, I have both my third and my fourth house starting in Cancer. My third house starts and ends in Cancer. My fourth house starts in there. So that's huge and that's deep. Having 2 fucking houses in a water sign means something profound, especially if you look up those houses. And then in Scorpio, okay, in that sign, Scorpio, well, my 6th house actually starts right at the end of Virgo, and goes from Virgo to Scorpio to Libra, I want to say. It ends in Libra, and then my 7th house starts actually in Libra, and then goes into, I'd have to look this up there, yeah, because Libra is after Scorpio, but then it goes into Capricorn, and then after Capricorn, Sagittarius. So, because I've talked about my 7th house, my 6th house goes into, like I said, Libra, but where my Saturn is, it's in the 7th house, but it's just after the Libra line of the 6th house, and it's in Capricorn technically, and which is kind of crazy, but it starts in Capricorn because I have both Uranus and Saturn in the same house, in the 7th house. But within that house, you see Uranus is still in Libra, and then I'll have to fix this after if I have this wrong. I'll check it after because I record this in spurts. I'll do like 10 to 15 minutes at a time. This way, if I get stuck on a topic too long, it's not the topic I'm supposed to talk about, I'll switch it up, kind of like what I'm doing right now. So you'll see my 7th house where it starts. Like I said, they're both in the same sign. No, they're both in the same house, in the same 7th house, but they're in 2 different signs. So my 7th house starts in Libra a bit, and then it goes into and finishes in Capricorn technically. So the top part where Capricorn and where the 7th house ends is where Saturn is. Saturn's in between the Libra line and the Capricorn line. So technically it's in Capricorn. And then the last one from Libra to Scorpio is where Uranus is, but they're both technically in the 7th house. But so my 6th house, where Scorpio is, okay, I have Pluto there. And if you know anything about that, you can understand what that means, being part of my 6th house. My 6th house has 3 different fucking signs in it, kind of like my 12th house. My 12th and my 6th house are directly opposite each other, right? And that's where my North Node and South Node is. South Node is in the 6th house. It's what I've already done. It's what I'm good at. It's what I did in a past life, which if you take all 3 of those signs in together with Pluto there, and Scorpio, the sex, death, and transformation, should tell you a little bit about myself. But then across it starts in my 12th house. Starts technically, it's in Pisces, but it goes all the way to Taurus. So within that, it starts. The 12th house starts at Pisces, and then the whole sign of Aries is in there, the first fire fucking sign, which I don't have anything in except for my North Node. And it's right at the line. It's on 29 degrees fucking Aries. So it's almost in Cancer. And then Mercury is in the sign of Taurus right before my ascendant starts. You see Mercury right at the end. It's still in Pisces technically. That's how big my Pisces is. It goes from there to there. But it's my water sign, and I have Mercury in there. Also within Pisces, though, because my 12th house starts in Pisces, but it doesn't start right at the starting of Pisces. My 11th house goes from Aquarius to Pisces. And where Jupiter is, which is a water sign, he is in Pisces, but he's within the 11th house. You know what I mean? This is how some of my houses got back on track. My first house being a Taurus is off because the first house is technically it should be in Aries. Second house should be in Taurus. Third house should be in Gemini. That's just the rulers and how they go, and then the planets have their co-ruled and their ruled houses and all that. Well, whenever the 3rd and 4th house hit in Cancer, I'm back on track because my 3rd house should be in Gemini, but it's not. My 2nd house is in Gemini, and I have the Moon and Venus in Gemini there in the 2nd house. But my 3rd house is supposed to be in Gemini. And technically, it's in Cancer. It starts in Cancer and ends in Cancer. And then my 4th house also starts in Cancer. So that's how I got back on track, because Cancer is the last sign of the first 4 signs. Your first four signs are fire, earth, air, water. Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. So that means your first 4 houses, I'm not saying they should be there, but that's where it corresponds. Your first house, your first sign, Aries. For 2nd house, 2nd sign, Taurus. 3rd house, 3rd sign, Gemini. fourth sign is supposed to be Cancer. So I'm on track at the Cancer mark right there because of those double houses. So then my fifth house is in Leo, technically, which is where it's supposed to be. But then it gets all out of whack again in the sixth house, I want to say, because then my sixth house starts in Virgo, which is the sixth sign, I want to say. And then it goes into, or no, possibly not. Anyways, I'm off topic. I'm not going to keep talking about this, but I'm just saying the Cancer thing that Gregg Braden has is in line with witchcraft, in line with empaths, in line with people that want to deal with people, more agreeable people, people with more of a negative female energy. Water is a female energy or a negative energy, however you want to look at it. I look at it both ways, that it is female energy, but it's also the negative polarity energy, which aren't exclusive, but have a correlation together. And he is a Cancer. He says this. So we know people with those signs are more empathic, have these powers, are more drawn to using emotion. There's a reason that the song you hear, if you listen on this on Spreaker, if you listen anywhere else, you don't hear it, but I do have a theme song, and it's a Goldfinger song, an old Finger song. It's called Spokesman, and the chorus is, when I want to learn about life, I don't want to hear a spokesman. And within that song, he says stuff like, I still believe in emotion. There's a reason I put that on there. And, emo is a type of punk that was all emotional punk, right? That a lot of people made fun of people for listening to it. And, I was one of those people that kind of listened to emo, but kind of made fun of the bands or people that did it because everybody else did it. And not on a whole other level. If I was one-on-one with that person, I would say, hey, I listen to that too. I just don't go around broadcasting it because I know how it's taken and all that. People with emo haircuts and shit like that talk about they have sliced wrists and all that. This is when I was a kid. This was the narrative, the way of thinking about people listening to emo, which is emotional punk. And it was that, they all want to kill themselves or they want the attention, so they have their slit wrists but the wrong way kind of thing. That was the joke. It's pretty sick, right? Being a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old joke when I was a kid from those years. That was one of the main jokes. But emo, emotional punk, the reason I have that song on there, I still believe in emotion, is because, well, what do you have to add to your thoughts to make magic happen? You have to add your emotion, okay? Gregg Braden talks about this exclusively on the Divine Matrix episode I told everybody they should watch. He says, whenever you marry thought and emotion, you get that feeling, and that feeling is how you talk to the Divine Matrix. So he's putting magic in his own way, in a different way, to relate to people, but it's saying the same thing as Frater says, as Uncle Birch says, as Corey LeBlanc, me, Ceremonial Witch is saying, and everybody else has said over time, that there's only two emotions, love and fear. And when you think a thought, or if we don't actually think of thoughts, which is what I think, okay, we have thoughts that are around us all the time, from the stuff we pick up to the stuff we're around, because if you've done the work and taken care of things, you're still always going to have stuff inside you have to pull out. It's not like a one and done, you can get rid of it. It's just like the dark night of the soul. I don't think it's a one and done, you get rid of it. But over time, you deal with all your past traumas, your past thoughts, everything you've had, you organize them and you go forward. But you're still always going to have stuff that keeps coming up that you got to deal with. But when entering places, whether you use like EMFs or any kind of spirit box and stuff like that, where you're picking up spirits and frequencies and all that, it's hard to know or say with any kind of accuracy, even with like a 50% accuracy, if you're picking up spirits, people that have passed on, energies that are left in the house, thought forms that are there, spirits that may be there, spirits that are here from a different realm, a different time, because all time is always going all at the same time, past, present, and future. That can almost be scientifically proven. So it could be right now in this house that I'm in, someone else is living here and it's a different house, or it's a piece of land, or it's summertime, or it's wintertime, or it's a whole different time, future and past, happening right now in the same house. So if I pick up something that measures frequency, it's going to measure the present, past, and future times. Or it could be picking up the energies from inanimate items like my fucking table, my chairs, the people that made those. What energy did they have in them when making this? And if they were the one that thought up the idea of making it, if that energy is in there, it might be a beautiful creative energy. Or it could be a dark energy of someone who's pissed off, that can't pay the bills, that are working a job they hate and think it's slavery. Then there's some dark energy there. And I can assume there's dark energy in my house, or someone sent me a spirit, or someone's fucking with me, or whatever. It's the devil. But it could just be the evil that all people are born with, the good and the bad. And that's one of the reasons I like Gregg Braden, because he understands that, and he won't put down the media. He won't put down the scientists that were dropping bombs on their own country back in the 60s. He will understand why they did it. He'll understand bads in the world, and he'll say those people that are against him or against his views are the people he wants to reach the most because they are a part of him, and he understands that we're all one. But I got off topic because I wanted to put that out there about Gregg Braden, because this is about Gregg Braden versus Jordan Peterson. But to get back to that small point, a sidestep I was making was when you add either fear or love to the thought you have, whether it's your thought, you think it's your thought, or the thoughts around you, or spirits around you telling you what to think. When you add that to your emotion, Gregg Braden calls it that feeling. It's how you speak to the divine matrix. So when you add that, whether you're conscious of it or not, whether you're in your temple trying to do it, or you're just on your couch meditating trying to do mind magic, all in your mind, or visualization, or law of attraction, or you're completely oblivious to this, whether you're a kid or a senior or whoever, and you're just putting your emotion into your thought, whether it's stressful bills or loving family, Christmas time shit, that's magic to me. That is, but he calls it feeling, and that's how you speak to the divine matrix. That's how you tell the divine matrix what you want. And this goes back to the same thing that Birch and Frater say, that everybody is doing magic. Everybody's doing magic, whether they know it or not, whether they believe in it or not. And that's what this is. Gregg Braden says it in a whole different way, but in the same sense, at the same time, as in the same way, basically to me, because I see it. But that feeling you have, because he says a story about two little baby girls, and I checked the story and it was real, but two twin baby girls that were premature born, and they separated them, put them in the incubators, and the one baby girl started dying. And then the nurse broke protocol, okay, and took that baby and said, well, I got to do something. She's going to die. And, at least for the last moment, she should be with someone who loves her, can't be with the mother, which is where she wanted to probably bring her, which is what I read. But she brought her to her other sister, put them together. And as soon as she did, the stronger baby sister that was doing fine immediately put her arm around her little sister. My God, it brings me to tears just thinking about it. It's so beautiful. And when seeing that image is what is talking to that, to the field, as Gregg Braden says. But as soon as that baby put her arm around her dying baby sister, her less strong baby sister, the baby sister that was dying's vital signs started getting better. And I came on the air saying before that nurse got reprimanded and potentially fired, and I've read that, and I don't want to say that's true or not true. I've read that. It could be people twisting it, it could be people changing it, but the story itself is actually true of what happened with the baby girls. What happened after the nurse, I don't know. But I can't say with certainty, but if you look it up, you'll probably see the same thing I did, that she got fired, that she didn't get fired, that she got raised, and all this stuff. There's so many different dividing stories, but at least the story about the baby girls is actually true from the parents and all that. And the point is, Gregg Braden says, whenever I said that story, there's people in the audience that had tears in their eyes. They were still crying. It's like, you're still crying. It's a powerful story. It's like, it's a true story. And these two girls are doing well today. And then people start clapping. And the one girl started crying even more. And it's because that feeling is how you tell the universe what you want. And that's your law of attraction. That's your magic. That's using your subconscious mind to do stuff. Whenever you are consciously trying to get something to happen, you can go over and over and do it over and over again, like through the affirmation way, and it will happen, but it'll take time. But if you're conscious and you use this way, this is why I say when you have a feeling like that, when you're conscious, as soon as you have that feeling, when you start getting emotional in a happy way, most of the time you should be doing it from a place of love and happiness, okay? You can use the other emotion to manifest things, but it's not always ideal how the manifestation happens. However, you can do it. But when you have those feelings, whether you're watching a movie, you're listening to a song, or something happens and it's just sheer beauty and sheer love and compassion on a human level that you haven't seen in a while, and it makes you stop hating and whatever. When you have these emotional, overwhelming feelings, you should think about what you're manifesting and use that feeling right there, and that's the magnetic pull towards you, okay, or the electric push away from you, whatever you want to think or use. But that's the magnetic pull that pulls your manifestation to you. So you're already having the emotional feeling. So switch your thoughts from those two baby girls healing each other, the one bigger sister helping her little sister, however you want to help, okay? Switch that to the feeling of love and happiness, and that tears in your eye for your new house or your lover or whatever it is that you're trying to manifest. You switch it up. You use that same feeling, because it doesn't matter how you got that feeling, okay? However you got that feeling is awesome. I would record that, tape that, listen to that every day, a couple times a day, and do your manifestation, visualize your manifestation coming to pass as if it's already happened, and not as if it's about to happen or it's coming in your future or whatever. As if it's already happened, you can taste, feel, see, smell, and you know, sit on and touch, enjoy what it is that you want to happen as you're having that feeling. And then this way it'll come to you faster. This is what I do every single day for my manifestations, and my manifestations have been happening so much faster and more frequent. It's off the chain. And this is part of the reason, and I'm 90% sure that this is part of the reason. And there's other factors that I'll probably get into, if not today, another day. But that's part of the reason. But that's what Gregg Braden says. This is how you speak to the field of energy. This is how you speak to the divine matrix and tell us what you want. So if you're not doing this on purpose, then whenever you have these feelings, whatever you're thinking about at the same time, that's going to happen. That's how you talk to this field. It's very literal. Frederick Xavier has a video called God Doesn't Care. If you're focused on your problems, okay, well, I guess this person loves problems, so I'm going to give him more problems. If you're focused on your financial, you don't have enough money, then you're going to get more of not enough money. It's going to keep happening to you. Stop focusing on what you don't want and focus what you do want, okay? Because if you focus on what you don't want, even though you're not putting emotion into it, if you keep doing it every day, so many times a day, you're using it as an affirmation, and it's going to happen. And then if you have emotion and you have those same thoughts, well, you're not only just using affirmations to make that happen, you're also now using the fucking shortcut. This is what magic is. Magic is the shortcut of getting stuff to you. It's using emotion with your thoughts and bringing it to you. And if you're doing that against what you want, you're making it come even faster. So not only are you reaffirming it all day long with those thoughts and saying those bad things over and over again without emotion, then when you do have emotion, you're adding it to that and you're speaking to the divine matrix, to use Gregg Braden's word, and making it come to you. So that being said right now, there's one of the main reasons I listen to Gregg Braden, because he understands magical procedure, even though he puts it in a different way to talk to people. Because like I said before, he's very careful on not talking about witchcraft or magic or any new age ideas in a way of like broadcasting a vibe or, you know, a frequency or an image of himself being either a witch or an alchemist or a magical practitioner. However, he 100% is. I've heard him on New Age sites. I've heard him have opinions. I've heard him talk. And I know 100%, the same way I know the guy from Infinite Waters is a magician or a witch or a sorcerer or whatever, an alchemist probably more than others. And the same way, you know, Birch and fucking Mind and Magic, they come out and say exactly what they are. This person doesn't, because he's careful on what he says. And, you know, Jordan Peterson will say he's not New Age. However, he's part of a New Age movement of people helping themselves and figuring out a way, because the people that maybe have tried magic or haven't gotten to magic yet because they can't get past the idea of, you know, this isn't true or this isn't real, they're realist or whatever. Jordan Peterson is perfect for those people. Gregg Braden is perfect for the people that might be too high up in the clouds, that believe in spiritual stuff. He comes in and he's very spiritual and he believes in a lot of the same stuff, but he comes in on a more balanced, grounded way and says he used to be a scientist, he used to be in the corporations and an engineer, so he knows what he's talking about, and he gives facts to this stuff. So it brings those people down from their high horse and actually into the realm of the physical and factual, and he brings them back to a more balanced place. But when someone can't get up there, up too high in the clouds and spiritual, well, Peterson is a perfect place for them to start, because he is teaching magic on a different level than Gregg Braden is without actually saying magic, whereas Gregg Braden is actually teaching magic. He's not saying magic, but he is teaching that there is something that we can't prove with science that he believes in, with math that he believes in, with, you know, geology and nature. You can't do an experiment to prove the stuff that he's teaching, although he has tried and he has given equations, which I've talked about recently. I'll play that clip for you as well soon enough, or at least the audio of it, of him saying the equation and the experiment that says that whole 8,367. Okay, that's my number. His number was 7,000 something for 6 billion people to change the world. That's how many people would have to be focusing on the same thing to create change in this world, okay? But it doesn't have to be the same thing. It could be same outcome, but different ways of getting that outcome. And I truly believe that's kind of what happened around 2012. And that's why we haven't seen anything go bad, and why we will never see anything go bad. Because one witch, as myself, or magical practitioner as myself, is worth about 100 fucking people, and maybe even more. All right? Because in my town of 40,000, I believe that just my thoughts alone, I can change my weather. I can manipulate my weather. I truly believe that. And I truly think I've done it, because I've taken days like today where there's not a single cloud in the sky, and I've said it out loud to my daughter, and I made her think she was doing it and all that, making it snow like she was, and don't hate me for saying this, but making her think that she was Elsa from Frozen and making it snow, my older daughter, and she made it snow. But I did everything, the process, and not writing anything down, just using my mind and speaking things into existence. And, I did everything, and then it ended up snowing on a day it wasn't supposed to snow. So, and then this was before I even seen what Gregg Braden said. But if it's only 100 people to change a million, okay, 100 people can change the circumstances within a population of 1 million. Well, then in my town where there's less than 50,000 people, you know what I mean? If that was 100,000, well, that 1% of there, I can do that. Maybe I'll do that equation fast and get the actual number there so I don't say the wrong thing. But that would be close to like 10, I would say, or even 1. And when you're smaller than that, 50,000 people, well, then the number is very small. Point is, I believe that I can do that just in my hometown alone. I can have, because I'm doing it right. I'm doing it proper. I know how to do it. I've built a rapport up with the angels, the spirits, with God, the universe, and all this. I've done things for the greater good. I've reduced my karma through different procedures and different exercises and rituals and grounding outside and different things. So I believe that I have more of an influence than someone just starting on this path, and versus the other people who can't help themselves and all that are doing baneful magic. Because I don't think baneful magic or hurtful magic, bad magic, okay, magic that people would say is black magic or whatever. Those types of things, okay, I think are harder to accomplish. I think you can still do it within the same realm, and I think it can still happen with the same amount of speed if they're a magical practitioner who's done a lot of things and they're doing baneful magic because something bad happened to them, or they're trying to even the scales. Then I think it can totally happen fast. But I think if someone gets into this field and tries to do that right away because they're just angry at the world, I don't think it's going to work as quick for them. And I think that's why whenever you're doing good things, I think it's easier for us to influence. And I'm not saying making it snow on a day it's supposed to be sunny is a good thing, because a lot of people would say that's painful magic because they're going to shovel their driveway and it gets fucking colder and can't go outside without getting wet. And if their kids don't have snow gear, then I'm making it colder and all this. And well, maybe not. But maybe I mean, when I made it snow like that, there's 100 people that were going to get their snow tires, but they put it off because it only snowed once. And then because I made it snow, those people went and got their snow tires, and I prevented accidents or children getting hit or dying. And I made people go get their kids boots and coats, because they said, well, I can afford to get my kid boots now, but it's not snowing anymore and the snow disappeared, so fuck it, I'll go spend this on something impulsive that I don't need and wait till my paycheck comes. And then let's say it was supposed to snow within that period, even before the kid gets the boots. Well, I made it snow faster on the day they actually had the money, so instead of being impulsive, they went and bought their kid's snow boots. So everything happens for a reason is all I'm saying. So I think that's part of the equation as well. But I will do the math on that when I come back from my next segment or whatever, to come back and tell you the exact math. But I truly believe for every magical practitioner that, and it's probably even more than 100, but we're worth about the minds of at least 100 people. Someone like Birch or Frater, or the even more powerful magicians and witches out there that are helping and influencing all these people. They're probably worth about 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000. If I'm worth about 100 and I'm still very novice to amateur level, these guys are professional to fucking extreme professionals, or adepts. You know what I mean? There are fucking, I don't want to call them our ancestors that we need to ask permission, because they're far from being ancestors, but they are the people that we need to go to learn more from and shit like that. So they can influence a hell of a lot more people, not only because more people listen to them than to someone like me, but because, so point is, there's the magical practitioners trying to affect things on purpose have more of an effect on reality than someone who's just affecting the reality on a whims impulsively every day, or stuck in routine / hypnotic rhythm every day. Because, yeah, those things are happening for them every day, but it's because they got in a rhythm, a pattern that they can't break a cycle. And those things are almost just happening on their own. They're not even really affecting it anymore. They are reaffirming it to affect. And that's why it's harder to break a cycle than whenever you start a new cycle to keep it going. It's easier to keep it. It's like your fat cells in your body, right? It's easier to never put on weight than it is to lose weight. And that's because before you put on the weight, you don't have the fat cell there. You don't have anything there, right, to fill up with fat. But whenever you gain weight, you create a fat cell, and then you can empty that fat cell. It's hard. It's harder than to not gain weight at all. But you can empty that fat cell, but it's easier for that fat cell to keep filling up because now it's there. You've created something, and nature always looks to fill that hole. Whether you think about this on a spiritual level, whether you think about this on a level of your mind, of magic, or just on a pure biology, proven, scientific anatomy, whatever it's called there, the study of your anatomy, whatever it's called. But whether you look at it from a scientific view or a spiritual view, if you have created a fat cell, all right, and you filled it up with fat, and now you're trying to lose weight, and you successfully lose that weight, well, when you lose that weight, if you don't replace that fat cell with something or put something else in there or try to get rid of it or whatever the case is, then nature's going to keep filling it up with what was already there before. So you have to replace that eating that's going to replace that, because you can go to the gym all you want over and over and over again. If you have a bunch of these fat cells that are looking for that fat to fill it up, okay, then it's going to keep happening. So unless you start a new routine, start a new program, start a new hypnotic rhythm, start a new, what's the word I'm looking for? If you replace that one habit of eating after you're going to the gym, or, you're going to the gym and now you can eat all you want, well, you're still going to gain weight, right? But if you replace that with something else, whether it's just changing your eating and you're taking in vitamins and better level of foods like seaweed, which, would be your, what's it called? Spirulina. The thing I'm going to play, he's going to talk about the people, Gregg Braden, he's going to talk about the people in Japan, Fukushima, and that's why I brought it up. He's going to talk about that, and the holistic practitioners and the doctors from that region that were right at ground zero when the thing happened, they weren't affected as much as most of the regular population who are just the regular people going to work. And he believes, and there's been things to prove this, but that the reason that happened is because these people were eating mainly seaweed, and I forget the name of the soup. I think the soup has seaweed in it too. And eating seaweed is something that Jerry Tennant promoted. Eating stuff from the oceans, the salty waters and all that. And seaweed, if anybody's eating spirulina, then you're covered. That's what seaweed is. Spirulina comes from seaweed, okay? Hopefully it comes from a good source. A good source you're getting it from, and it's a healthy and it's a natural source. But nonetheless, spirulina is the seaweed. So it's one of those superfoods that everybody should be intaking, and I definitely intake it. But those people weren't affected because of the stuff they were eating. And there's natural iodine in spirulina, in the seaweed that's in the water. And we all know that iodine, and now it's not just any iodine, there's some iodines that aren't compatible with the human body. So you can't just go eating iodine, because I want to say iodine is a type of metal, or some type of, anyways, but I'm not going to say because I don't know for sure, but there's a lot of European countries that hand out iodine pills to the population because of the radiation, because of the Wi-Fi towers, and, maybe it's because they're also doing what the States and Canada, well, I don't know about Canada, but the States, Canada, definitely with the chemtrails and shit like that. We're right alongside with that. I don't know if we have a history of doing nuclear bomb testing on our own soils and letting our people be affected by it. I would say probably, but I don't know 100%, but maybe these countries are given that because they did that or had done that in the past, and this is a way to reduce the amount of cancer patients and their loved ones and people dying, because iodine does help with radiation poisoning, with intaking radiation, with cleansing your body from the radiation that is around us every day. And it's not just from the things that man made. There's like radiation and different things from different things from the sun. There's a reason why too much exposure to UV rays can cause can cause skin cancer. What is cancer? Well, they treat cancer with radiation, but it's to kill off. But radiation can cause cancer. So anyways, this is not what I'm supposed to talk about, but the point is the iodine in spirulina is something everybody should look into. But he talks about that in one of those clips, so it's super, uber important. And I forget where I was going initially with that, but so I said Peterson, what he talks about is in line with my magic because it's in line with action and doing something, wishing something, talking, saying exactly what you want, finding out what you want, and then saying what you want, and then writing down goals. And he talks about how writing is important, and he talks about the shadow work that Jung has performed. He literally talks about night being linked to the subconscious mind and daylight being linked to the conscious mind. He talks about all these deities, Egyptian and otherwise. He breaks down Christian mythology and all that. So he is in line with the magic. And now Gregg Braden, there's no doubt in my mind, is also in line with magic because he literally says it not word for word, how like Frater or the other people, or Golden Dawn books, or Poke Runyons would say it. But in the same sense, he is saying it. He's very New Age. He's very believes in a lot of these things, and so they're both, to me, part of this spiritual New Age magical system. And there's no reason for me not to listen to either one of them. Now, where they differ is on specific things like that same interview I'm going to play for you where he talks about the seaweed in Fukushima and all this. He's going to talk about how there was not scientific, but experiments done or surveys done. One of those two, I don't remember. I'll correct it after though, but where asking if, I forget how much, I want to say like 400 times or something pretty big fucking number, but it was repeated, the same survey or questionnaire or experiment, and it was about if competition is useful for society, for people, in schools, and the growth of humans, all these different levels, either on the personal level, country level, sports, politics, all these different subjects. I guess it's the only word I can come up with right now. And every single time competition was bad. Okay, cooperation was good. Now, this struck something in me because I listened to this a couple of days ago because I was looking for something to add to my episode about how many people it does take for change, because I kept saying I'll make this episode, so I want to make it. But when I listened to Peterson, or when I listened to Gregg Braden, when he said that, it reminded me of something that I watched about Peterson recently, talking about how, when two hockey teams get together, because he was talking about the left side, and he says the problem with the left is too much compassion, too much empathy, to the point where they don't want kids to keep score anymore in soccer games. And the parent has to tell the kid, when the kid's upset because their team scored or they lost, that, well, no, he didn't lose, we didn't keep score. And the kid asking, why am I upset, or why don't we keep score? Isn't the point to win? And then the parent having a hard time trying to explain it. And I'll let him say what he says later about that. But whenever I heard Braden say that, it reminded me of the other guru that I just recently was binge watching, because going through my second dark night of the soul, I'm always guided to Peterson, because Peterson takes things from psychological levels about your fears, about how to make your life better, how if you're down, depressed, and things are lurking dark, how to make them light again. And it's a simple solution, but it's a hard one, and it's one that's not often talked about. But anyways, for this specific problem, he gives the not really metaphor, but the simile. He uses hockey, saying, okay, well, our hockey is a hockey team, two hockey teams meeting on the ice to play a hockey game. Is that competitive, or is that cooperation? And most people automatically assume it's competitive, because they're competing against two teams are competing against each other. And he says, oh, really? Well, both these teams decided together to play hockey and play by a specific set of rules. And if certain people or certain players aren't following these rules, well, they agree to go into the penalty box for an amount of time, because they are no longer playing the game they played. They're being too rough, or they're cheating, which is not part of the game structure, the game rules. Therefore, they go in the penalty box. With kids and teenagers, okay, we can understand that. But whenever you have a 6'7", 250-pound or 200-pound, power defenseman who's there to block and make sure no one passes his line when they're in the other zone, or block shots or stop people from scoring when they're in his zone, well, he just listens to the referee that are normally only regular size and average size people, and obviously don't have the same skill he does, because if they did, they'd be playing and not reffing the fucking sport. But then they just go in there for the penalty, and if you get too many penalties or near the end of the game, then you get actually kicked out of the game, or you say too much, and they all abide by these rules. Well, that's cooperation. They're cooperating. And then within the own team structure, right, there's some competitiveness for the players to always be better than the other players, and they want to be the star and they want to look good. So they kind of compete against each other to do better, and they keep raising the bar within their own team to, how many goals did you score this game? Oh, I can do more than that. Or how many shots did you block? Or goalies, whatever. And the goalie that sits on the bench, whenever he gets a shot because the other goalie, well, he has to play good so that they know this and all, whatever. So yeah, there's competition there. But if that person doesn't pass the puck, well, then he's not going to get very far. Maybe one team, it's going to be beneficial for him to hog the puck and go around because all his other players are tied up and he's faster than the one guy who, if they're playing man-to-man, he's faster than that one guy and get around if you can get it past the goalie. But if you can't get it past the goalie, well, then once again, it's not going to do him any good. Best way for a good goalie is, again, going side by side by passing the puck to different people when he doesn't expect it and put it in. So that's cooperation, once again, from both teams cooperating. You know what I mean? They're all going after the same puck. They're all trying to keep the same puck. So it's not competitive. It's not like you have multiple pucks out there and they're all trying to compete with who can get the most goals with their specific puck. They're all chasing the same puck, and the one team wants to hold the same puck, and not every player gets that one puck at the same time. They have to pass it and maintain it on their team. And truth be told, the team that can manipulate that puck better and keep that puck on their sticks versus the other team, right? The team that has control of the puck more of the game than the other team. You have two teams, right? And if the one team has control of the puck, 3/4 of the time, the other team only has 1/4 of the time. Well, not always, because there are some times where the goalie plays an issue, right? You can have a great team but a shitty goalie, and the other team only got 14 shots on net, whereas the other team got 40 shots on net. But if the goalie for the team that got 40 shots on net wasn't very good, well, then those 14 shots the other team took on him, well, they're going to probably score 3 or 4 out of those 14 shots. And if the goalie on the other end had 40 shots on him and he's really good, well, there might be only 2 or 3 that get it. Therefore, it could be a 4-3 fucking game in favor for the team that didn't have the puck the most. But 9 times out of 10, the team that gets more shots on goal because they had the puck more than the other team is going to be the team that wins. And that's due to the cooperation, practicing together of this team. Any successful hockey team, whether it's national, a pro league, or just your peewee or your novice or your house league, the team that practices the most, the team that practices way more than they play. If they practice 3 times more than they actually play the game, their actual scheduled games, right? If all they do is play their scheduled games, well, that team's not going to be worth a damn. But the team that practices more, has more cooperation, practicing with their teammates, then that team is going to be more successful than the other teams. And that's the way it works for everything. And you can say, well, that's being competitive. They're being so competitive that they have to practice all the time. But that's because that's the sport, and they want to become better. They have to be competitive for better cooperation. How do you become more cooperative with your community? Well, through competition, through competing against each other and raising the bar higher and getting better goals. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back, and it's awesome. So anyways, before I keep going with the whole cooperation thing, which is kind of the part of the program or the part of the show I think people want to hear about the most, because at first I started saying about how they're similar and how they both help the community, but then I took an actual specific point where they both don't see eye to eye on. So these 2 gurus have helped me out immensely that kind of teach people in one way, shape, or form how to do magic, whether it's Gregg, Braden teaching you how to use your mind correctly mostly, or Peterson telling you how, well, you have to actually ask and have actions that go alongside with what you're asking for, and then, 9 times out of 10, you're going to reach your goal. Now, it's going to happen in steps. It tells you how to do it practically, but it'll still help you. And I made the distinction how someone who can't get on board with spiritual stuff right at the beginning, but does know about a change. But let's say they're programming for anything spiritual or God, or they're an atheist, or they don't believe in a higher power. So how can they believe in themselves having power if they don't believe there's a higher power, right? So that's how Peterson will help that classification of people, right? Whereas people who get into magic, Braden's going to help them out, especially if they can't say they're not manifesting or anything, or not doing things right, and they're trying to learn from people that maybe aren't teaching right or have infiltrated the community, so they haven't quit completely yet. They're still convinced that this stuff is true, kind of like how I was for a while. It wasn't until the law of attraction stuff actually panned out that, I realized, okay, there's something to this. But for a while when it wasn't working out, I still believed in it, but I thought maybe there's something wrong with what I learned, and there kind of was. There was a lot of things missing out of it. Now, at the time, I thought maybe it was the people not knowing what they're talking about, but I think it was just me not understanding completely what they were talking about and not having an actual, like I keep saying, a curriculum, a way to follow. This is the first step, second steps, third steps. I was just saying law of attraction works. You can attract what you want with your mind by thinking about it, by doing affirmations, by doing these steps. But there's a lot of ways to get to that step. You have to depolarize. You have to be grounded. You have to be in the middle. You have to do a lot of transformation work for this to work best. But if someone can't believe in all that stuff, that's where Jordan Peterson would come in and help teach them. And he's going to pave the way to get them to start changing their life through their actions. And that eventually could show them that, okay, I do have power. I was able to do this. And then they might be more open-minded, because people are more open-minded when they're in a happy place, whenever they've helped themselves out and they've done things, and it's easier to maybe listen to this spiritual woohoo. But when things aren't going right, and then someone comes along and says, well, you can do all this shit, which is spiritual stuff, in your mind, and you're a powerful being, you're a God, and all this, they're going to be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? They're not going to listen to it. So this is where these both people have meeting and can help, because none of us are the same out there. Now, one person like Gregg, Braden, and another person like Jordan Peterson can appeal to large groups of people that have similar qualities, similar interests, similar ways of learning, similar thoughts, similar programming. So they can affect them. But not everything Peterson says is going to work 100% of the time on 100% of the people that listen to him. They're going to have to take what he says and alter it to their circumstances and input their specific things that they want to happen, or different ways to go around things that they may not be able to do specifically how he said it, and then it'll fit their narrative. And once again, this is the premise on ceremonial witchcraft. The fact that, ceremonial magic is my curriculum of how I do things, and I follow it to the T, but witchcraft is the hodgepodge of all these different systems of magic out there that you can use their ways to your benefit, and you can leave the crappy shit out and keep the good shit, where the things in ceremonial magic I may not do or agree with, I can replace with different types of spiritualities and religions that, may or may not be considered witchcraft, and I can replace certain things with that, or keep the premise and do it on different. Point is, this is what I do. This is what I think everybody should do. I think everybody's spirituality and what they believe in has to be different from one another. I don't think we should all be worshiping either the same God or the same force, especially if it's something that was created by another human being, and there's no way to know if that's true or not true. But my point is we should all have our own beliefs, because some people are going to think making money and taking care of your family and having enough money to spread your community and help people are going to be important. But those same people may not have children of their own, so they can commit their time 100% to their work to make that money, and then the rest of their time volunteering and, finding somebody who likes the same stuff, who maybe doesn't want children, but wants to help the children of the world, versus someone who wants to have children and teach them the right way, have to make enough money to support them and give them what they want, maybe put them through school and all that, but make their children, if their children want to be world leaders or change the world, well, they want to teach them the right values to do that. And if that's not what they want, they still want to be able to keep their family line going and have the same values and same rituals and same, holidays and different things you have to do, or how you keep family together. And this is, how our family's been, or keep their own family religion, spirituality is going within their family. That's going to be more important to them. And both are okay. Both are right. Both are beautiful, and you can't it may be not possible to do both those things. It might not be possible for you to work a job that pays enough that you can have enough money to spread out to the community. If you're going to have children, that would eat up most of that money, and be able to spend your extra time teaching your children the importance of, spreading your money around and teaching things and holding your values and your different holiday not habits, not rituals, but your holiday your ceremonies, your celebrations. It's the I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of. Like your Christmas time, your Thanksgiving, you have a tradition, family traditions, keeping your family traditions. You may not be able to do those things at the same time in your life period. You can probably do them in your same lifespan over your years, because once your kids are gone and doing their own thing, then you may have had enough money in the bank for yourself, or might be able to make enough money quickly within a few years, especially if you're using magic, to be able to go out, volunteer, and help your community and do things like that. So you might be able to do that in the same lifetime, but potentially not in the same in the same period of your life, same decade or 2 decades of your life. But and that's why we need to. Or more, definitely more. There's more than 2, but I'm just taking 2 right now because I found, direct opposite ways of thinking, or a specific example between these 2 men of how they feel about cooperation and competition. So, but I think it's I think it's necessary to have different views and ways of thinking that I believe are all right. I'm not saying Peterson's right, and I'm not saying Gregg Braden's right. I'm saying they're both right. And we need both. We need people on the left. We need people on the right. Even if I don't think Gregg Braden is the left, and I don't think Gregg Braden is the left, and I don't think Peterson is the right, because I think Peterson does his best to not. He says he doesn't like left marksmen more than anything. So by default, most people put him on the right side. But he says the extremes and the fundamental right aren't right either. He'd probably be, if you try to put it in the middle, no, he'd be more on the right side. And Braden, same thing. If you try to put him on in the middle, he'd be more on the left side, because he does believe more in the compassion and how things need to be changed, or textbooks need to be changed. Because, I'm pretty sure that Peterson is a type of Darwinian, where it's not necessarily through apes, though he talks about how we came from birds and snakes more than he believes apes, but that there was an evolutionary process, maybe not the same as Darwin, but whereas Braden will say flat out, and this is another distinction between them both, but I don't have specific examples of that, but Braden will say that Darwin, we know scientifically, is wrong. And he says that, but they won't change textbooks because it would be too complicated, or it doesn't fit the narrative, or it's too scary to change that. Most people believe that all their life. But anyways, before I get any further into that, I just want to say a couple things. First, for the percentage thing, okay, I was pretty off, because if it's 100 people to change 1 million, okay, where that math came in, if I do 50,000 people, well, let's just do 100,000 actually to start, okay, so 100,000, all right, and times 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, times 0.01, which is your 1%, right? So that equals 1,000 people. And if you take the square root of 1,000 people, you get 31.6 people to affect change within 100,000. Okay, so 31 people for a city of 100,000 people. That's not many. That's like what? A little over 3 covens of 13 members each. 3, that'd be 29. So 31.6, let's say 32 people. Okay, so then 50,000. My town is smaller than 50,000, but 50,000 times 0.01. Oops, I wrote that wrong. 0.01 equals 500. Okay, last time the 1% of 100,000 was 1,000. Okay, now 1% of 50,000 is 500, which is basically half, right? So the number is half as big, right? The main number was 100,000. The second number I did was 50,000. That's half. So half, and the 1% of the 100,000 was 1,000 people. And then, so now the 1% of a town of 50,000, which is almost as large as my town, but not quite, it's 500,000 people. But the amount of people to change within that, okay, the equation is, You take that 1% of your population and you do the square root of that. So basically, it's what number times what number equals your 1%, right? So the square root of 500 is, and I'm pretty positive, okay, 22.36. So if we take the 6, it would be 22.4. So we're going to stay at 22 people here. We're not going to round up. But even if we did a 23, okay, because 23 times 23 is going to give you like 500 and some. But it would take 22 people in a town of 50,000. Now, my thing actually says 48,000 is my town. So it's going to be lower than that. So 48,000 times 0.01. Sorry I'm making you guys have to listen to this bullshit, but 480 is the 1%, and the square root of 480 people is 21.9. So 22 would be the number. So 22 people in my town. That's 2 covens of 11 members, bud, to change my town. So when I tell you that I think I have enough power to make it snow in my city, I'm not bullshitting you. You know what I mean? Because let's say there's a bunch of people out there hoping it's going to snow, and let's say there's 25 people out there hoping it's going to snow. Out of those 25 people, there's 13 of them that don't do magic. Oh, even bigger, smaller than that. There's 20 of them that don't do magic, and there's 5 of them that do. And then there's me. And even if I'm part of that 5, let's say, well, out of the population that doesn't want fucking snow, right? We have the square root of our we have the square root of our 1%, okay, that want snow on that day. And then on top of that, there's magical practitioners actually using their mind to create that, and everybody else's mind is in cahoots with that. Just maybe they haven't put emotion in it or whatever the case is. So I'm going to be able to influence that. So using this math, what I said, for me as a magical practitioner, I'm worth 100 people that aren't. It's not necessarily the truth. In my town, for me being a magical practitioner, I'd be more like I'm worth about 20 people, maybe 10 people, something to that effect. But that being said, doing it right, I can change my reality. I can do that. And the more I don't lie, the more practice I take and I do these things, the more people I listen to that say this stuff is true. Because if I listen to Peterson, he's going to tell me that what I'm doing will work. He's not going to say it in the right words, but I take what he's teaching and I put it into practice, into my practice. It's more of the grounded part. And you could say this is the left and right of, a different type of spirituality. Because I said a long time ago, the right-hand side would be my Frederick Xavier, and my left-hand side would be Birch. And that's where I want my polarity to be. I want my left side to be fucking Uncle Birch and witchcraft. It's no longer the devil. It's no longer atheism. It's no longer that. It's witchcraft is the way. And then on my right side, it's no longer Christianity, God, the Holy Trinity, and all that. It's now ceremonial magic, using God names and shit like that. So I'm representing God in a different way, the universe, the all mind, with my right side being ceremonial magic. And at the same time, I'm representing the earth. Our earth Gaia, nature-based paganism spirits is my left side. And those two, when I put them together, makes my magical practice potent. Now, in the same sense, I can have, my right side being Jordan Peterson for the psychology and using the dark night of the soul or shadow magic or finding responsibility and being able to change myself, okay? This would be my practical, mundane way of fixing my life. And then on the opposite side, my subconscious way of fixing my life is Gregg Braden is talking to that field and all that. I think both accomplish the same ends, but for what I'm trying to talk about, when I'm trying to tell you about these 2 men, I could say that and I could use that, and that's going to be beneficial because, there's not just polarity from side to side, and there's not just polarity up and down. Good and evil would be up and down. My magical practice potent. Now, in the same sense, I can have, my right side being Jordan Peterson for the psychology and using the dark night of the soul or shadow magic or finding responsibility and being able to change myself, okay? This would be my practical, mundane way of fixing my life. And then on the opposite side, my subconscious way of fixing my life is Gregg Braden is talking to that field and all that. I think both accomplish the same ends, but for what I'm trying to talk about, when I'm trying to tell you about these 2 men, I could say that and I could use that, and that's going to be beneficial because, there's not just polarity from side to side, and there's not just polarity up and down. Good and evil would be up and down, right? Because heaven's up and the devil's down. So you have that polarity. So that might be my Braden and my Peterson, right? but because the down would be Braden, right? He would be the earth, and the up would be the God, conscious mind, possibly the sun, and because the moon and the sun are setting, but they both do the same thing. One's up when the other one's down, and one's down when the other one's up. So let's say that's the conscious, subconscious mind. And then from my side to side, my left and right polarity, my male gender, and the law of gender, female and male, okay? Well, my left side is witchcraft, and I'm not saying Birch is a girl, okay? He is a man, but witchcraft, more than not, represents a goddess figure using the earth, paganism. At least most people think that, and it's not completely accurate. And, you can have types of witchcraft that honor male and female spirits within the craft. And to me, that's a balanced craft, and that's a good craft, and that's all you need. But just for the sake of argument, my up and down, I just said Peterson and Braden, and, that takes care of the mundane and the not mundane level. But then the law of gender needs to be taken care of within my body, connecting my conscious and my subconscious mind. So once again, I could use Braden and Peterson for that, and then I could use the down and up with witchcraft and ceremonial magic. Ceremonial magic representing the gods, using the god names, and demons and all that. And within that, you have the right polarity. So I don't even need to have this polarity scheme, because the way I use magic and ceremonial magic and witchcraft, they have polarity built within them. But just for the sake of argument, what I'm talking about, I can use these interchangeably. I can either have Birch on the left, representing the negative force, the earth, the water, and the earth force. And then on the right, I can have ceremonial magic representing the fire and the air, right? Or, my fire could be ceremonial magic. My air can be psychology by Peterson, right? Because air, Mercury is an air, so is Saturn. It could be the psychology, it could be your mind and all that. Fire could be your action. I could switch those, actually. Put Peterson on action and put Frater, Xavier, ceremonial magic at the top, being the air, your thought, and and then on the bottom, where my water is, I have opposite air. If I have if I have Frater up there, then I have to have Perch down there where the water is, for moon, for witchcraft. And then over there where earth is would be Gregg Braden, where he's talking about the earth and nature and the cycles of the world and all that. So I have all my polarities covered with these 4 things. And that makes me a well-balanced person. It makes my world balanced, because these 4 things are taken into account. Now, yes, there's a 5th spot on the pentagram, which is spirit, but all 4 of my polarities here cover spirit. So I don't need a separate one just for spirit. Now I could. And for me, the separate one I have for spirit is ceremonial witchcraft, which isn't just the up and down polarity or the side by side polarity. It's a combination of all these polarities being in harmony, being in sync with each other, representing the right way to be. And I'm in between all of them, because I take what I need from all these polarities, all these different things I watch from these 4 people I just mentioned. And there's many more that add to these, okay? But they would all be in a classification of these, the things that are in line with when I watch Peterson, the people that are in line when I watch Braden, the people that are in line when I watch Frater, and the people that are in line with the Birch, the witchcraft. But these are my 4 polarity schemes. I have up and down, and I have right and left, whereas most people just have negative and positive. I talked about this a few episodes ago, how Christianity would be a better balanced religion if they honored, or not necessarily worship, but understood the devil or Satan's role within their spirituality better. I'm not saying they need to love Satan or worship Satan. No, that's the last thing you need. But they would be better well-rounded, better versed. It would be better for them if they realized that Satan wasn't somebody making them do evil things. If they realized that Satan was a being that their God put in charge of a very important job, and that job being either keeping the souls in hell or scaring people into being good, which I don't think is a good thing at all, or anybody should do necessarily. But I think it's something that, if they stopped blaming the devil for all the bad things and thinking everything other than Christianity is of the devil, if they stopped doing that, they would be less polarized and better off, and not all blocked up with these different emotional blocks and shit like that. But I don't have that problem because I'm well balanced within these four. And sometimes whenever, a dark night of the soul comes around and I'm having an issue with one of these spots, whether it's, okay, well, I can't stay at home anymore. I need to go get a job because I have transformation I have to do on myself, and I can't keep doing money magic because that would be a full-time job, having to just use my magic just for money. And honestly, I gave it a shot. I did it for the amount of time I was off, and I was successful at it. But the problem is, the longer I didn't go back to work, the more my wife was worrying about our money situation. So I know eventually that was going to hinder my magic. So I went and found a job, and it turns out this job is great for me. I'm learning from it. I got time to do things. They trust their people there. They pay well, and everything's working out. And because of that, my wife's mindset has actually improved a huge amount. So the more I stay there, the easier it's going to be for me to do magic, because now her mind's not in the way of the magic anymore. She's not worrying about the money I'm manifesting, because truth be told, for my own money to manifest, it happened pretty quick. But to get her money to come, whether it was to her bank account, whatever, it took a lot longer. I've had episodes about this for the same thing I did for my bank to have my money. I got it the same day, whereas for her, it took 3 weeks. You know what I mean? And that's her mind and my mind going at it. But because she can't stop her mind from, or couldn't at the time stop her mind from thinking about bad things, then it's what was hindering my magic. So by doing what I did, getting my job, it made everything easier, and I'll be able to actually save money and shit like that. But the point is, whenever I had the dark night of the soul, my spot where I just placed Jordan Peterson, which was my fire, right? Which is somewhere I have a lot of issues with, which is my fire. Because if you look at my chart, I don't have any planets in Aries. I don't have any houses at start in Aries, so that means I don't have any houses represented by Aries. And my first house is actually in Taurus, Taurus is a lazy, they say the Taurus is lazy, stubborn, doesn't like to do things he doesn't want to do. And it's very hard to get a Taurus mad. They're very easygoing. They don't have much fire, right? Because it's an earth element. It's actually the opposite of fire is earth, right? And that's where my first house is. That's where my sun is. That's where Mercury is as well. Although he's also he's not in the first house. He's actually in the 12th house, but he's in the sign of Taurus. But so the first house, anyways, where I was going with that was the fact is I don't have much fire in me. I only have one sign that is represented by fire. And I think Saturn's in it. And Saturn is what? Restriction. You know what I mean? He restricts. It's limitation. So the one house I have a fire. I have the one house where there's a fire. Where I have a fire sign of the zodiac, okay? I have restrictive limitation Saturn. Now, he is retrograde, though, in there. Pluto, Saturn, not Mars. Mars is the only one on that side, because Mars is in the same house as Neptune, but Neptune is retrograde, Saturn is retrograde. Every planet from Saturn further is retrograde in my chart, okay? Everything from Jupiter down towards the sun is not retrograde in my chart. So all the bigger planets that take longer, from Saturn to Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, are all retrograde in my chart. So you can look up the meaning of that if you want to look it up. Point is, though, the one place I have fire, I have restriction and limitation. Now, retrograde, I don't know if that means I don't have the restriction and the limitation. I know I read or I've seen the information about having Saturn in your 7th house, meaning, you might get divorced before your Saturn comes back around the age of 30 or whatever the case is. Anybody who's married before the age of 30, they're going to get divorced. But if your Saturn's retrograde, it's not so intense. There is still limitation. But you're not as limited as someone who has it going direct. So therefore, that's the way I assume in that fire sign. I want to say Capricorn that I have Saturn. Capricorn, because in Sagittarius after that, where I have Mars, where I have my fire planet, I have him in Sagittarius, which is what? An earth sign? Yeah, because after fire, it's earth. So if Capricorn's fire, then Sagittarius would be earth again. So I have my fire sign in an earth sign, right? I have my earth sign in an air sign, my Venus, which would be an earth sign. The only earth sign, the only fire sign are Mars and Venus, the two opposites. And they are actually almost opposite each other in my chart. My fire is opposite my Venus, and Venus is in my Gemini, right? And Gemini is speaking, commerce, communication. I have my moon in there with Venus. And the moon normally reflects the sign it's with. So Venus is what you love, what you put value in, okay? So I put value in communication. I love talking, and my moon's in there, which represents my subconscious mind. So you can say, I would love talking about the subconscious mind, kind of what I'm doing here, kind of proving that that's accurate. So I love talking about my subconscious mind, and my subconscious mind is going to love being talked about. It's gonna take on the qualities of Venus, being the goddess. It's going to put value and love in there. And Mars is in Sagittarius in the 8th house with Neptune. And Neptune is a very watery, house. And Sagittarius in the 8th house is about, higher learning. Sagittarius is the horse is another earth sign, but it's about higher learning, spiritual priests. A lot of priests, monks, recluses, the hermit card comes to mind when I'm just talking about this. That's what that represents. So I have Mars in there. So my passion is gonna be what? Higher learning about fucking spirituality, more information, intelligence, college, second, learning as much as I possibly can is gonna be a problem. All I'm gonna want to do is learn more. Sagittarius is always, finding like not imperfections and trying to make it better, but having, Mars in that sign, it's something I love. So I'm going to love talking about, not necessarily always occultism, because in this sign, spirituality would be more along the lines of like religions and stuff like that. But I also have Neptune in there. Neptune in there Neptune can have ties to drug addicts and all that. And I certainly used to love those, having Mars in there. Mars is my passion. Sorry, not love. Love would be Venus. But so I have him with the higher learning and all that. And, sometimes that can mean I can get stuck on a dogmatic relay or find a guru and just dive in and believe wholeheartedly, almost being naive, gullible belief in certain gurus and stuff like that. So me making an episode about 2 gurus that seem to oppose each other and telling you that it's okay to listen to both and just try to take whenever they disagree on specific topics for what it is. Find the points that the one bring up, find the points the other one brings up, and find a way to make it sense in your head so that you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because a lot of people will do that. Well, this person says this, and it's the opposite of this other person. So I got to figure out which one of those I like the best and just go wholehearted with that. And I'm telling you, that's imbalance. That's what happens with Christianity and believing only in the one God and not taking apart other gods. And then you start judging everybody and thinking you have the only way. And this is not the way to go about that. And so, like I said, your birth chart is going to reveal a lot about you. And using astrology to figure out how you are made up is super important. You can say, well, how's that going to help? It's going to tell me what I already know. Well, it not necessarily tells you what you already know, because I didn't know what Mars meant being in there. But when I see it on paper and I see what's happening, I took action towards that, right? I saw my Venus. Frater Xavier said this on one of his first astrology classes, not even an astrology lesson. He just said, well, go on your chart and look where your Venus and your Mars is. He's like taking into account the houses and different things. But just to start, your Venus will tell you what you love and your Mars will tell you what your passion is about. So when you add your love to your passion, then he's like, that'll tell you what you love and you're passionate about in life. And then if you go down that road, figuring out what fields or what kind of jobs you can do in those, and depending on the signs, right? Whatever sign and house what you love is in, and then whatever sign and house your passion is in, you put those two together and you can find a job. Well, I did that. And then I started making this podcast not too long after that. You know what I mean? And I've loved it ever since. And it's something I really cherish doing, to the point where if I don't think I'm in a good mood or I'm going to be able to get good information, or I don't have something specific to talk about, that I won't even do it, because it means so much to me to actually do it well, or try to give out good information every single time that may not be being given out, that I'm not going to do a half-assed job. So it's definitely something I love and something I'm passionate about. But I got to take a second there. But the 22 people for my town of 48,000. But if you're in a town with 100,000, what did I say that was? 100,000. Well, for 50,000, it was 23 people. So if you double that for the 100,000, it would be somewhere around 50 people probably, or something like that. But anyways, I'll do it here fast before I go off again, just to make sure. Because if you're in a town of 100,000 people, well, then the 1% of that is 1,000, and then the square root of 1,000 was 31.6, so 32 people. So that was the point I wanted to hit at here real fast before I go any further with the whole debate on competition versus cooperation. But I'm going to keep going on that just so I can prove that you can use both gurus if one says you need cooperation and when you need competition. All right, I'm gonna have to switch probably to my phone, and I honestly, I might have to make a second episode of this shit, just playing the Gregg, Braden, and Jordan Peterson videos about how they talk about the opposite things, just to show you what I'm talking about and all that. I may or may not. I haven't decided yet, but just because with all the shit I've already recorded there, I mean, I got 3 hours of time on this, but anyways. I'll get into that when I have to get into that. So prior to the last two recordings that I was just doing, and I mean by that I mean right now when I record, like I just said, I only do about 20 minutes at a time. First of all, because I'm recording on my phone, so if I go over 20 minutes, I can't send it to my laptop via text message. And it's just faster and easier than actually plugging in my phone and taking it physically off the phone, because otherwise it doesn't even work. But if it's over 20 minutes, close to 30 minutes, it doesn't work right. It takes a while and all that shit. So I do 20 minutes at a time, and it also helps me from if I start going on a topic too long and beating it into the ground and, talking about it way too much, then when I restart the phone, I get onto a new topic, sometimes something else that's important, sometimes something not important, but it stops me from repeating too much of the same information over and over again. So that's what I mean by blast two. But I was about to get on the topic of I was already talking about the cooperation versus competition thing. And to me, it's okay for one guy to say competition is something that's important and one to say cooperation is more important. And, they both don't like the opposite. Or, because Peterson's not saying cooperation is bad per se. He's saying there is cooperation in competition. When there's competition just for the sake of competition, then whenever it's for something that's when there's competition for something that's trying to hurt people or put people down, then obviously that's not good and there's no cooperation in there. But competition is something that is within us, right? And, and the same thing I'm going to play with Gregg Braden, which is going to be the first one I play. So if there's time, you're going to hear that one on here before anything from Peterson, because of the things he explains. And like I said, this was in 2011 because he was really trying to get this from 2007 was the Divine Matrix, and he was making books before that. But he's trying to tell people about the magic, about what you can do, and if people giving real life experiments on people curing cancer in 2007, using this language to the Divine Matrix to the universe, basically using your subconscious mind to heal and praying as if it's already happened. And feeling that emotion that you would feel as if something has already happened. Okay, using that, he's given real examples of anything from cancer to rain to achieving peace, and giving you the actual mathematical equation of how many people that takes, because that experiment was done, and he tells you where you can look it up and look that up and see that for yourself. So I believe that if it wasn't for Gregg Braden and people like him, I said this in my Instagram video today about this episode, but if it wasn't for him and the people like him around that time saying this stuff, that we would have a very different 2012 and later right now. And I think the things that would have happened, the events accumulated, would have been completely different. So he got out there and said that, to change 1 million people, you only need 100 people to think to think a certain way. And here's the proof of the things we've done. Okay. So, and then he went out there and said that all the indigenous tribes and old spiritualities with the writings on the walls that we've been able to decipher and shit like that all say that 2012, is a pivotal point. It's the end of an age and the beginning of a new age. And that all these tribes and stuff are saying, he doesn't give scientific proof, but he just tells you his opinion and what he thinks and the information he got. And he says that they all said the same thing, that, there's like 7 things that can come to pass, and most of them are bad, and there's only a couple good ones. So he was teaching people how to speak to this field and create their life as they want to create it, and also and that was kind of like, okay, he's giving you the way to fix your life, fix your shit, and then when you're done with that, think of the new earth that you want, the earth that you want to create, where there's no bad shit, there's only peace and harmony and people get along, and all the stuff that's bad with our world isn't there, and we can actually change that. So that's what he was trying to do. And I believe if it wasn't for him, we'd have a very different outcome. Now, you can look at the movie 2012, and the release date on Canada here, at least, was 2009, right? And I believe 2009, something else may have happened, but I can't remember. But anyways, and the movie 2012 was exactly about a big cataclysm happening. And a lot of people will say predictive programming. They were trying to create this to happen, or they like to make the argument that, like The Simpsons and a multitude of other shows show, well, right now they show Trump being assassinated, which he hasn't yet, and I don't think he will. But they say predictive programming because they predicted the 9/11 things and with pictures in the background and stuff like that, which, it is what it is. Who knows? But there's a lot of things saying predictive programming, and that might have been predictive programming. They're telling you what's about to happen and all that. And 2012 came and gone, and we didn't have any cataclysms like that. Now, we have been having earthquakes and shit like that right up into present time right now. And like I talked about the Fukushima thing, and you're going to hear more about it with the thing I played with Gregg Braden. But, these things happen, and we keep trucking on and shit like that. And I think a lot of it has to do with, and you can look at 2012, the movie being released in 2007, as two things. It could have been served to get people to think that this is what's happening and get a bunch of people out there, especially the Christian people who don't know how to pray, right? If what Gregg Braden says and all the magical people say that you have to put your thought with feeling, and when you take your thought of someone sick and then you add the feeling, you're visualizing the sick person, they're sick when you're visualizing them, and you have the feelings of sadness, and you're asking God to heal them, but you're sad at the time because they're sick. And then, well, that's what you're creating, right? You're creating them to get even worse. You're making shit worse for that person. You're not making it better. So you're adding your sad, negative emotion, your fear emotion, to a picture of that person being sick. So that's terrible. So maybe that's, you can say that people made that movie because, well, that's what they wanted people to do. They wanted a bunch of people to pray to God saying, please don't let 2012 happen. And as they're praying for it to not happen and praying wrong, and as if like, oh, I'm so grateful that 2012 came and gone, has come, and we are all still here, and we're thriving, and there's no peace, or there's peace on the planet, and we are free from any catastrophic events, man-made or by Mother Nature. I will thee, I'm free, so would it be. Something like that would be the right way to pray, putting positive, loving emotion into it and being grateful to the gods. But if you're praying and saying you don't want the bad things to happen, well, first of all, the negative fucking words in there just get canceled out. So when you say, I don't want the world to end, you're saying, I want the world to end, first of all, and then you're putting a negative emotion into that. So you're making that come to pass, and you can look at it both ways, and both are right, and both are true, and both are going to happen. You can say, well, the reason why that thing came to pass is because you said you don't want a specific thing to happen, and then you put emotion into that. So the gods, being very literal as they are, the divine matrix being as literal as it is, said, okay, well, this is what they want. They want this to keep happening because this is what they visualized. They showed me all this catastrophic shit happening and wiping out the earth, and they gave me the emotion of fear. So, maybe that's for the God of fear to take over and say, okay, this is for you, buddy. And then the God of love only handles the loved ones. You can look at it any fucking way you want, whether it's the Braden's way, whether it's Peterson's way, whether it's Frater's way, whether it's Birch's way, whether it's any other religion's way across the world. It doesn't matter. But if you put emotion into something you're visualizing that you don't want to happen, you're going to get that. And you can say it's because of the negative words in there, and I'd say yes. You can say it's because you visualized it and you put fear into it, and I'd say yes, doesn't matter. But that has no choice but to work out and happen. So I think, you can say the movie coming out before the date 2012 was there to help us, maybe, or maybe it was put out there to show us what's a potential, and if we don't change the way we're thinking, when you add that to people like Gregg Braden going around telling you that, this is what we have to do to change this outcome. Well, then that's what people did. They went out there, and there's, at that time they probably already reached the 100,000 mark of light workers to change the fucking world. And you know what I mean? At least the worlds where those catastrophes could happen, and the other parts of the world where there's no TV and shit like that, and there's just tribes, well, they already know this shit, so we don't even have to worry about those percentages. Let's say out of that 6 billion that Gregg Braden said the world was, there's 1 or 2 billion of those people that don't even believe in Christian doctrine and actually have the tribes around the world, because it wouldn't be just certain places in the world that don't have this. It would be like places where I am, where there's a Indian reserve. They might already know the secrets and they just don't tell it to people. And there's places like that all across the world. So within that 2 billion I just talked about, it brings it brings it down to 4 billion people in the world that are doing it probably the wrong way. And out of those 4 billion, well, the number, if for 7 billion or for 6 billion, the number was 7,000 some odd people. Well, if it's now 4 billion, well, that 7,000 would be closer to 5,000 people. And I'm sure there was way more than 5,000 people wishing and making sure this didn't happen and everything went right and feeling gratitude at the time. So like I said, if it wasn't for Gregg Braden and people like him, none of this would happen. So, but now we've reached a point where those people have had their way with the world and their views have shaped the way the world is. And let's say, there's a lot of people that, when it comes to voting, for example, take the whole Trump thing. Trump is portrayed as a right side person. So, well, Frederick Xavier said it pretty good, I believe, the one time when he said, well, what happens whenever the pendulum swings too far to the left in a two-party political system? Well, then you get 4 years of the right. And if the left doesn't fix their side or make something better for the people, because he was saying how the media keeps calling people, biggest and racist. And he's like, people are tired of coming home and hearing that they're biggest racist, someone gay-hating fucking Nazi or something to that effect. He's like, people are tired of it. So if people can't pray to get the things they want, if they pray and things just keep getting worse, well, what are they going to do? They're going to go to the polls and they're going to invite in some, and it could be subconscious, it could be not subconscious, but if the president is seen to be on the left side, well, and they don't like what's going on, they're going to vote on the right side. And a lot of people said they don't understand how fucking Trump got in there, but when you look at the electoral map from when he got voted in the first time, it was a sea of red, which represents right, and blue represents left, and only New York and California were blue. I mean, there was some blue spots all over, but red was predominantly more everywhere on that map, and it was crazy, absolutely fucking unbelievable. So if the left, back in 2012, if everybody who was quote-unquote, doing magic, or, any law of attraction shit, when it got big, if most people were doing that to change the world to what they thought, well, that would make sense that we're here now in a time. You could say Age of Aquarius is upon us, and that's why the Jesus myth is dying and this and that. You can say that all you want, and I'm sure there's truth to it, because I've even said it. But you can also make the argument that Gregg Braden got the 7,000 people he needed to fucking change the world, and people like him have done it, got it, to change the world to where they want it. And, that's why for a while there's a lot of pushback saying Illuminati and dark magicians, this and that, because, maybe the people in power knew that this is fucking unheard of. How did this happen? We even cheated with the fucking ballot system to make Trump not win, and he still won. So how did this happen, And it could be made the argument that this is why it happened. Things are left, and I'm never going to tell you that anything that is completely left or anything that's completely right, even if I like gurus that are on those sides, I'm never going to tell you that it's good to be completely left or right. We need to be in the middle. Peterson outlines this well. How do you get, if you're on a rope, okay, and you have the left side pulling and you have the right side pulling, and let's say they're both pulling the same amount of weight, okay, well, then you're going to stay in the middle, right? And they're not going to be able to pull you left or right. You're balanced because they're in balance. And how do you remain that balance, so you don't have the left pulling too hard or the right pulling too hard, and then it keeps going back and forth? Well, you get them to talk to each other, because both are needed. And there should also be an up and down system that, that affects or, has, because 4 ways of seeing situations are better than 1 or 2, okay? And 5 is probably better than that. But point is, to keep balance, you need the left and the right people. You need the best and the worst of the left and the right people, all right? And you need communication between them, because the 2 worst on the left, the worst people on the left and the worst people on the right will show you how bad it can become, Okay? If one side wins or one side ends up, whatever the case may be. Okay? If that's, so you need to know the worst circumstances of both. But you also need the best people of both. So you need to see the positive sides of, an all left or an all right. Because when you put in all those things, when you put in situations where the worst of if the left all the way the extreme leftists, if you put in stipulations so that can't happen, and you put in stipulations for people all the way on the right situations to not happen, and then you put in stipulations that the left and the right that are the most balanced continuously talk to each other and work things out, well then you have a political fucking view or system that might actually work to the benefit of mankind. And that's what you want ultimately anyways, and that's what I would say. So I like when Peterson talks about that shit, because it really shows you what the world could be like and what could potentially happen. So I'm just grabbing the mail right now. I just broke my mailbox, son of a bitch. But anyways, so give me a second here before I fucking drop it or some shit. All right. So that would be my view of the politics. And I think it's in line with exactly what I've been just trying to get my point across here just now. And the point I'm trying to make is, that Peterson says it best when he says, if you have the left working with the right, talking with the right, then you can keep the country, your citizens, the world potentially in the fucking middle, equally, both in coordinate, in balance with each other. And it's the best way. And as above, so below. On the macro level, the politicians of the world, the governments of the entire, of all the countries, as above, so below. Also, in your own personal life, in your municipalities, in your states, in your fucking countries, your states and your cities. This should be the same fucking thing. It should be no different. And this is how you would accomplish that, by doing this. And this is how you get the most balance, I would assume anyways, and the quickest way to achieve it. So, all that being said, I would make the argument, I'm not going to say this is true or false, and I'm not blaming Gregg or anything like that, so don't think that in your mind. But I'm just saying, let's say people who believed in Gregg Braden's way, who done the things Gregg Braden wanted, well, now these people know they have power and they know how to use it. So everything they want to come to pass would happen. And nothing is ever a one and done. Nothing ever is, complete. So even the most spiritual person, if they don't do their shit right, they can become imbalanced once again. And if they become imbalanced, well then, if what they want happens, and it's coming from a place of imbalance and not a well-centered, grounded place, well then there can be affecting the world in a negative way. And too much to the left or too much to the right, doesn't matter, but that could be happening. So what I would say is, potentially that's what happened. And if people feel powerless or they're not getting their wishes or things aren't happening for them, then, then they're going to fucking, they're going to do it on the voting ballot. And, that's what we see happening. And now we're coming to another voting election. We just had one here in Canada, and we're going to have one in the States there shortly. I don't know exactly when, but it's going to be happening. So, therefore, I believe this is what's happening. And this is one of the reasons I say that Jordan Peterson is necessary, because he may not be on the right per se, or even say he. And if they become imbalanced, well then, if what they want happens, and it's coming from a place of imbalance and not a well-centered, grounded place, well then there can be affecting the world in a negative way. And too much to the left or too much to the right, doesn't matter, but that could be happening. So what I would say is, potentially that's what happened. And if people feel powerless or they're not getting their wishes or things aren't happening for them, then, then they're going to fucking, they're going to do it on the voting ballot. And, that's what we see happening. And now we're coming to another voting election. We just had one here in Canada, and we're going to have one in the States there shortly. I don't know exactly when, but it's going to be happening. So, therefore, I believe this is what's happening, and this is one of the reasons I say that Jordan Peterson is necessary, because he may not be on the right per se, or even say he's a right, but he said before in interviews, I don't know how long ago it was, I know it wasn't like this current election that just passed, but he talked to the right hand side, the conservatives, and asked them how, because they can't really reach young people. The Green Party and the Liberal Party has an easy time reaching them, and they would be considered probably left. And the conservatives would be the right, because you become conservative when you're older. So most young people don't want that. And he would say, okay, well, stop promoting the rights, you have the right to, and start promoting responsibility, because rights and responsibility go hand in hand together. But no one's talking about that. They're just talking about all the rights that you have or don't have. And they're not saying, well, why you have these rights, or why you need to use these rights. And they're simply just saying, that what the rights are. And he says you need to start promoting responsibility, because responsibility gives your life meaning. It makes your life a better place. It gives you absolute meaning, because when you have responsibility of it, like a child, or for a family, or another person, whatever the case may be, then you have a reason to go to work every day. And if you start hearing stuff about you being a slave and all that, you might not even put you might not put any fucking thought into it whatsoever. You might just be like, no, I don't go to work because I'm a slave to the system. I go to work to support my fucking family. I go to work to make my life better, to have enough money to support things, because, okay, whether we're a slave or not in the system doesn't matter. If I decide not to work, I'll be on welfare or EI or whatever, and I won't have enough money to do the things I was just doing. I won't be able to collect an RSP and, do my Freedom 55 that I've been doing since I was a kid, or, have a separate retirement plan, because, I pay in a CPP, I'm going to get a CPP, but the Canadian pension plan that I get, if I hadn't worked or paid in taxes or paid for anything, you know what I mean? I know this because my wife, like I said, that's what she works for. But, if you only have your CPP, well, then you have to retire. If you retire at 65, you got enough to live off of for 10 to 15 years, and it's not very comfortable. You know what I mean? You got to budget and be pretty tight, or possibly even work under the table. Whereas if you do a Freedom 55 thing, you can choose at 55 whether to keep on working or not, or even start collecting while you're working to help pay for your shit, or, any of your Canadian pension plans, or a tax-free savings bond, which is probably the best way to go. And maybe I'll have an episode that gets more in depth into that. And the Canadian government won't even tell you this, okay? I'm not going to say exactly what I would say, but, there's certain people that I know that work places that, told me that they cannot bring up these specific tax-free bonds because they are the best way and the least amount of money given to the Canadian government, because, you take out a specific bonds, or there's specific things you can save up for, but the minute you take them out, they're taxed. They're taxed on, so you don't get as much right away. Or if you do take them out, you're not taxed right away, but then whenever you go to do your income tax or whatever the case is, then you get even more tax taken off of something. And sometimes you get double. Whereas there's another one where it's just you put money in there, and part of like the interest or something to that effect, they take it off as you go, and you're able to, it's the best option anyway. So these places that I know where these people work, it's not my wife's, but somewhere else that deals with something like this, governmental, they can't bring it up unless the person asks them about it, because it's not something technically they're selling. But if they ask them about it, they have to give certain information, and even then they don't even give the full information, because they don't want to direct people towards those specific bonds. And part of the reason I know this is because I worked for one of those World Financial group for a while. I was trained to be one of those representatives to make some money when I first came off. I never stuck to it because I couldn't see myself going house to house, door to door, trying to recruit people and try to sell stuff like that, because being the agreeable person I am, I don't want to just go in and disturb people's lives. But anyways, besides the point. But I believe that this is why Peterson is important right now, and why you're getting a burst of him, and that's why he's recently gained his popularity to a whole new level. And it took the transgender issue to bring him out, but the things progress and things happen with divine timing. And he had viewership and he got pretty popular on his own, but it wasn't the way it was, and it wasn't until in my opinion, and there's no way to prove this, but my opinion is that there was a time, this is a time that we're entering, that we needed more people to pick up responsibility, because maybe there was too much of the empathic, magical left side out there. And I know it's certainly true in my life, because I was willing enough to stay at home and use my magic for the rest of my life to make my life happen. And the same rules that allow me to use my magic to manifest my life are the same rules that my wife and my children have. So if my wife and children don't believe in my powers, or even worse, don't think I'm doing anything, thinking worse thoughts, and thinking we're not secure, and this and that, well, when I have 5 minds, well, no, the baby's not right away because she's too little, but let's just say 4 out of the 5, because we're a family of 6. I have their 4 minds, okay, against my magic, plus my mom and my sister and my dad at home thinking I'm not going to get a job anytime soon, and I'm just getting lucky with these checks coming in, and eventually it's all going to crap out, and then her praying the wrong way about it, and this and that and the other thing. I'm at a big disadvantage, and maybe I wasn't the only one. And maybe, we had a big percentage of people doing magic and it working. And in some communities where it's a lot of magical practitioners, like in California, maybe in New York and stuff like that, where, it was more blue than red when it came to like the election time. Maybe in those places, there's a lot of people able to do these things and make witchcraft shops and things like that, whereas down here, if we have one, we're lucky, and they may not last too long, or sometimes they do well for a while and then something happens, or whatever the case is. So it's not as easy to make manifesting life like this, and there's too many people in your way. So maybe someone, Jordan Peterson comes along, who I find is in line with magic, but his focus is more on the what to do and how to implement action into the magic. And not only that, but get more people who aren't in a magical community yet, or into a magical field yet, but are on the cusp of it. And instead of getting into, because a lot of the magic cusp, a lot of the new age stuff right now is not the same as the new age stuff that I got into, and it wouldn't be this. And the new age stuff I got into wouldn't necessarily be the same new age stuff that Gregg Braden was teaching, a decade ago in 2007, 8, and 9, and 10, and 11 before the 2012 thing. It might have been more uplifting because he was one of the main gurus out there teaching it, and he has a hell of a way to teach. And that's why I'd rather put Gregg Braden on from 2011 than put on some brand new guru that could either be someone who's infiltrating the community and trying to make us all sound fucking whack and crazy, okay, because there's a lot more of those now than ever, and that's, the right side fighting back to the left, or even more magical practitioners fighting, so other people don't get in the community so they have more power, or whatever the case is. But not only that, but it's not the same as it was probably back then, and it's not with the same values and good research as Gregg has done, and unless someone reloads his new videos and they get popular, no one's going to look into that until, they find it at my stage, or however synchronicity brings it to them. But so if there's a lot of people that are automatically having aversion to the spiritual stuff, but they're supposed to be hitting that right now, they're supposed to be getting into spiritual stuff right now because they know there's a problem, whether it's because of the whole Trump thing and they realize there's an issue, and or they got into some Illuminati, or their church stuff got too corrupt and they realized there was a problem there. Whatever the case is, they're supposed to be hitting the spiritual stuff, but because the spiritual stuff has gotten to this plateau where even spiritual communities can refuse people now. Covens, witches, magical practitioners can refuse people now. And then you have fake ones out there scamming people and taking their fucking money and this and that. Putting that aside, there's an abundance of it, and people being arrogant and because they're winning and all this, it's going to scare those people away. And some people are just going to have a natural aversion to anything spiritual when maybe that's what they're supposed to have. So instead of that, there's this man, Jordan Peterson, who's kind of like a segue, who says, okay, well, you need change in your life right now. You need to find meaning. Well, here's how you do it. First things first, you got to clean your fucking house, clean your room. Start taking care of your kids the right way. You want your kid to be, by 4 years old, you want him to be domesticated enough that he doesn't fucking, every parent and teacher that sees him isn't lying to his face and giving him fake smiles and fake words telling you fake shit that isn't going to help you, you know. They just parent-teacher interview, they just tell you what you want to hear, so you're off on your way, so they don't have to be awkward. But when you really need to know that your kid is progressing or not progressing, and then you're just going to have to, eventually, you're going to get a blunt teacher that's going to tell you the truth, but it'll be too late by then. He's going to tell you that. He's going to tell you need to clean your house and your room, which Frederick Xavier also said. You need to clean your fucking room because your room, your house is a fucking extension of your fucking mind, right? And, you know, if the extension of your mind is all cluttered and disorganized, well, so are you. Stand up straight. You need to project outward fucking, outward, not disagreeableness, but that you're not going to be a pushover, that you can't be taken advantage of. And then he also teaches that, you know, you need to be in contact with your dark side. You need to understand that, you know, you're not going to go hurt people just to hurt them, but you want people to know that you can hurt them if you're brought to that. In this way, people won't take advantage of you, because people look at you and they think you're a wimp and you're a pushover and they can do whatever they want, then they will. And that's the problem with internet in general in our community, because if you don't see the person but you talk a good game and you have fake people promoting you or not even real statistics saying that you're awesome, then people are going to hand over their card thinking you're going to give them spiritual enlightenment or whatever the case is, and then you're going to get ripped off, and that's going to scare you from ever getting spiritual enlightenment again from anybody. And that's part of the problem. So then Peterson comes along, puts all his lectures on for free. You know, he does have paid things you can buy, but for the most part, there's a lot of learning you can do just on your own from his classes. And to a lot of people, that's like, oh my God, it's like a ray of light in a fucking dark world. And he is, I'm telling you right now, he is a fucking segue. Doesn't matter if he's on the right or the left, because if you're getting into magic or any spirituality, your job is not to be on the right or left. The right or the left are the two views, the two opinions, and there's also the up and the down, the north and the south, however you want to look at that. But there's also that one that you have to come in contact with if you're getting into this. And if you want to be a well-rounded person, then all this shit is important. But the point I'm trying to say is you need to get the view of the right if the left has scared you away or has robbed you or whatever the case is. And he's important for that. And not only is he going to help the people that are supposed to get onto a spiritual path but can't because they've been fucked over by a spiritual so-called guru or whatever, he's gonna also recruit more people, get more people to believe in his thing, or get on board a hell of a lot more people that maybe weren't even ready for a magical fucking initiation or tradition or whatever the case is. And even if they never get there, at least they'll have the fundamentals of, you know, psychology, their kids' psychology, how to help themselves, how to use responsibility properly. They're going to get all those fundamentals, all those important things, and eventually by the time they get to spirituality, well, they're already going to have enough things under their belt that they're going to be golden. And that's one of the reasons I think Peterson is absolutely important, and he's absolutely a breath of fresh air. And even though, like I said, the cooperation and competition thing, they don't have in common, these two men, but what they do have is in common is, you know, at the time that Gregg Braden said that, he may not even be agreeing with that anymore. That was back then, because there was a lot of competition in the world, and it was the wrong kind of competition. You know, people trying to be better than people just for the sake of being better. And, you know, in this time of world that we're in now, with all the selfies, Instagram, people getting overnight, people trying to up people with a better post or better show or whatever the case is, you know, we're more well-rounded now and less about that kind of competition. And I think everybody wants to see everybody succeed. I truly believe that we're in a better place right now at the moment when it comes to all that stuff. But in the same sense, we had to get to the left. We had to do the extreme left side first that Gregg Braden helped promote, because, you know, had it been for him, we might not be seeing today, or we might have had a war, or all these bunkers and shit, you know, all the Illuminati shit that's talked about, and martial law shit may have happened. You know, I watched a lot of those shows when I started out my dark night, or not my dark night of the soul, but when I started my first initiation, my Saturn chakra opening, as I like to call it. When that happened, I saw a lot of the dates on those things, and there were old dates. And then I would see the same episodes with newer dates. People just, you know, taking the same doomsday predictions that never came to fruition and updating them with a newer date. And it was just total bullshit. And that helped me out huge. But people don't look at the dates of these things and they think they're brand new. But yeah, what do you think happens? Everybody's putting their focus on this shit. So it took somebody like Gregg Braden to come out and tell you that your focus has power and you can use it to change the world. However, maybe the wrong people saw that and used their focus in a bad way, or maybe maybe they went too left and they stopped using their power and they just kind of let things be and not brought it back to center. And that's our job now. And that's why I think Peterson is a good thing and a breath of fresh air right now, because the fact that he's making things not so left and he's not trying to bring things to the right extreme, he's just bringing people into balance, I think, into a little more balance. Because like I said, if it wasn't for him, I never would have went back to work and had this great time that me and my wife, or had her mental state change and me be able to get done what I'd done, or even get through my dark night of the soul. It's either one of them. So I think they're both needed, both positive and both. All right, so I'm really going to have to wrap this up because, I'm probably going to be over and not be able to play any of the fucking clips on here. But just a few things before, in case I forget before the end. I put a couple books on my Instagram video. I said I put a couple books on my last episode, like I said I would. I can't guarantee I'll put some on here, but there's a few more I wanted to put on there. Just didn't have the time because the strep throat and all that shit, needing to sleep. And tonight I need to go into work, so I want to put this on soon because I said somewhere between 3 and 4 I'd be going live, and it's 3:45 now. So I have way more to say about this because I didn't really hit on anything from Gregg or specifically anything from Peterson. But, it is what it is. But when it comes to cooperation and competition, they're kind of exactly, the as above, so below, as, saying hot and cold. And the Kabbalion says there is no degrees of separation. There is no such thing as opposites. Everything is just the same shit. It's just a different polarity, basically. And this is no different. These two things are cooperation and competition. I'm not saying the opposite of cooperation would be uncooperation, right? And the opposite of competition would be no competition. But technically speaking, if we're going to use these two in the same sense, like this, basically, as competition and cooperation, if we're going to talk about them like this, I would say that they would be considered, let's just say they're opposites. Technically, by the Kabbalion, if you're studying this shit, you would know that there are no such thing as opposites, that they're just different degrees of the same thing. So competition is doing everything for yourself to be better than the other person, and cooperation is, instead of trying to be better than the other people and looking better than them, as competition and always striving to be better than somebody else, then cooperation would be asking those same people to do the same goal. Competition is trying to achieve that possibly on your own and, potentially trying to make people look bad or make yourself at least look better. And cooperation is not caring about who does the better job or looking better, but everybody works towards the same thing. Now, Gregg Braden also said in the same statements or in the same, different interviews, but he's also said that, because he believes in the power of our mind and stuff like that, because he believes that we can do this and we don't have to get together in committees and we don't have to, be out there on a picket line and saying, this is the way, or we have to go out there and do some big action to fight the man or fight these powers or anything like that. We can actually just from our home think right, think about the things we want or don't want with the right emotion behind it, and we can accomplish this. Well, this would be cooperation, but it's not necessarily cooperation in the sense, it's not competition, right? But we are technically competing against the evil, right? It'd be good versus the evil if you want to look at it in a polarizing view, but it would be, us against the man, us against the circumstances. So technically, competition may not be necessary and may not accomplish the good things of the world, but to a certain extent, you're always going to need competition, because if there is no bad or good polarity, then everything would just be dull and boring. For something to be great or something you enjoy, you have to have circumstances prior to that aren't as enjoyable, right? And if something isn't as enjoyable, it's either really dull or, not a super fun thing to do, but not something you hate. That would be your extremes of dull, right? To the absolutely mind-numbingly dullness to, not so dull, but, and then either way, whenever you do this one thing, it gives you happiness and satisfaction, and, it's fun, and that makes it not dull. But basically, they're both the same thing and just different extremes of that same thing. So point is for there not to be competition, for competition to not be in this world, it would be a very dull world. And, we wouldn't have these outlets and sports teams and stuff. Because what is a sports team? What is a sports superstar? What is a musician? What is an actor? Well, it's somebody who's beaten the odds, who has this talent, who uses this talent to propel themselves to another level and to make enormous amounts of money. It could be said that this is a manifestation, their own manifestation that they did. They saw themselves as a star and they got there. And if it wasn't for competition and people opposing them, telling them they couldn't do it, or people cheering them on, telling them they could do it, both cooperation and competition, because sometimes if you have to fail to succeed. And failing all those times means you competed and you didn't do so good. And then all of a sudden you competed and someone cooperated finally and you maintained it. Well, you kind of need both, because if you didn't have that competition in the first place, if someone didn't say, well, you're not bad, but you need to work on all this before I'll do anything, well, then you never would have got there. You never would have got better. You never would have succeeded. You never would have heard all those things that you needed to hear to become better. All right, sorry about that. The kids came home, but I have to resume, try to find the thought I was still on. But anyways, so what I was trying to get at was, without the competition, these actors, these actresses, these sports stars wouldn't have got to where they were. Now, once they're there, do they still have to keep competing to be in the spotlight? Possibly, within their own team, but they also have to be cooperative. You have to be cooperative whenever you get there, right? There's collaborations between stars for other stars to either make it or for stars to allow other stars into the spotlight, or, if a star's not in the spotlight anymore, they do a collaboration with a star that is, they become in the spotlight. Whatever the case is, these are manifestations of these people's dreams. And without competition and cooperation, this wouldn't happen. Like, all their family had to cooperate and help them out, because it's not just one person that makes it, it's the entire family that ends up helping that kid, that student, that star, that singer out. But they get there because of their talent, because there's something there. But they just singing doesn't make it, right? They have to either write their songs or have a band play those songs or have somewhere record it. So they have to have cooperation. But the competition between them and somebody else, like we have these fucking TV shows where it's people singing and the best one gets a fucking record deal. Well, that's what happens to every star, just not on the fucking TV show. But they have to keep trying until they make it, until they keep tweaking their little flaws through competing and getting constructive criticism to become better. And Peterson is kind of giving you that and saying, when the leftists are telling you for your kids to not even keep score when they're playing a sport, that's not teaching them a good lesson. And more than that, the parents don't know what to say, because, he tells you you're supposed to say, well, you're not trying to win the game, you're trying to win the championship, which is a series of games. And even life isn't just one championship, it's a series of championships. And you want your kid to play by the rules, play right, and try to win. But when they lose, be honorable losers as well. Because teaching them there's no score just means they can win, they can lose, they can cheat. It don't matter. There's no rules. And that's not how life is. There is rules. There is hierarchies in jobs. And, even though we might be more left now and more compassionate and trying for equal rights and all this stuff, it doesn't mean that our entire world, our entire civilization is like that. In fact, there's still hierarchies everywhere, and the places where they went the most egalitarian by offering more opportunity of equal opportunity for jobs and equal outcome, meaning everybody gets paid the same for the same amount for the same job, okay? Women don't get paid less for the same job they do as men. Men don't get paid less for the same job they do as women. The more egalitarian these places become, the more different, the more unequal the people choose. So in the States and Canada, there's more men in the STEM fields, which is the science, technologies, all those things with math and computer programming, where you're dealing with things, you're programming computers, you're making cars, you're making whatever. Those jobs tend to pay more than someone who's in daycare or early childhood education or a teacher or a nurse. Now, there are male nurses, and the male nurses normally get paid more than the women nurses, but that's because they end up becoming anesthesiologists or different, specific fields, still classified as a nurse, but in a different field where there's a pay raise, and they end up working with a machine, because men are more disagreeable things, tend to not want to work with people. They rather work with things that don't talk back, whereas agreeable people, and which are most of the time women, they rather deal and work with people. So there's the difference. But in these places in the States, there's a difference in pay and all this already, and there's more men in the STEM fields and there's more women in fields where they're dealing with people. But where they made it more egalitarian, like Scandinavia, there's way more, there's less women going in the STEM fields as a result of the equal opportunity and the equal pay and the equal outcome, okay? Opportunity and outcome. Opportunity is the equal, women are allowed in the STEM fields just as much as men. They promote it more, through TV programming, all these different things. And equal outcome, which means they promote the fact that if you go in a field that's dominated by men, you're going to get paid the same or more than men if you're a woman. And it's still not helping them. In fact, it's the reverse is actually happening. More women are going into the fields that we are initially said dealing with people, and more men are going into those other fields. It's not promoting more men to go in women fields and more women to go in men fields, because the reason that it's like that is because most women typically like those fields, and most men typically like the other fields. So just by saying, well, it's equal outcome and equal this and equal that, doesn't mean they're going to change what they like, what they feel inside. They actually go to those places. They actually made more of a separation, and this is what Peterson promotes. And he also promotes, because he believes competition is necessary, and if without competition, you know what I mean, and we wouldn't get to places where we are. And without competition between stores, for example, you wouldn't get cheaper prices. And my wife went to the pharmacy the other day, and she got the same pill, and one was a slower, she got 2 pill bottles. One was a smaller milligram, one was 20 milligrams, one was 10 milligrams. And the 10 milligram pill was more expensive than the 20 milligram pill. And the reason for it was the 10 milligram pill has just came out. And if you know the rules of patents, then when a company comes out with a pill or anything, they control the patent, I think, for, 2 to 4 years, somewhere in there. It's either 2 years or 4 years. There's a certain amount of time that they have the patent to themselves to make their brand, because that's the idea. They had the idea, they made the stuff, and it wouldn't be fair for a generic brand to just come, make it cheaper and undercut, right? So they own that patent for those many years, and no other pill company can come and make a generic brand cheaper until that runs out. After the 3-year mark, then generic brands can come out of the wazoo and create it. So that means during that 3-year period, other companies probably start making the pill and testing it, so that as soon as that's up, they're ready to put it out. There's no rule against that. But the point is, for the 20 milligram pill, it was cheaper than the 10 milligram pill. And you would say, well, why is that? Well, because the 20 milligram pill has been out longer. The patent had been expired where the people cannot make it. And there's more competition and more generic brands. So because there's more generic brands, the actual brand had to go down as well, just that alone. And that's not because of cooperation. The cooperation is what makes the patent, the one company, be able to have the price skyrocketed, because they cooperatively agreed to that rule. To the person who creates something gets out of the patent and gets to charge however much they want. So technically, in that sense, cooperation is actually bad, because it's everybody agreeing that we should make all these regular humans that need our service pay this much for this amount of time, and everybody who has a patent is allowed to do this for that amount of time. Only once we introduce competition after that certain amount of time, then the price goes down. So only once competition comes in, then the person with less money can afford that product, whether it's a big screen TV or pills that they need to survive. Then they can afford it. But until then, you better hope you got coverage, because it's going to be fucking through the roof. And that's why we do have medical coverage, because it can be quite expensive for those pills, especially the ones that still have patents on them that haven't expired to be able to make generic brands yet. And that's why there's pills out there. You can't get a generic brand. You ever go to the store, try to get a pill in a generic brand because the one you have is just too unaffordable? Well, that's why. It hasn't passed that time limit where the generic brands can start the competition and bring it down. That's why there was a rule for the longest time that you couldn't get a monopoly in business and wherever else. And that means, if you were the only company that owned a specific service or product, then you'd be able to make the price whatever you wanted, because you had no competition. And generally speaking, when that happened, the government would kick in and equalize it. That's the rule here in Canada. So for the longest time, they wanted to come in and they wanted to do that with insurance companies, because insurance companies could make and break the rules, because they all cooperated together. There's actually an insurance company here in Canada called the Cooperators, but they all said, this is what you got to pay, and here's are the rules, and you're going to pay this so many times, and when you get in an accident, we're going to try damn hard to not pay for anything and find a loophole. And then if we do have to pay, the next time your premiums are going up or you're not even going to be coverageable, you know. And the government's like, well, this isn't fair. These people are paying for service and they're barely getting honored. So they wanted to step in, but I don't think they ever have, to be honest. And it's the same thing with, you know, the money marts and the places that do the payday loans. The government wanted to step in and reduce it because there's too many people using that, going bankrupt because they're using all these different payday places, and the payday places are shooting money at them and increasing it every time without any way to stop. But it depends on how much you make. Obviously, they're not going to give somebody who only gets a couple $100 a week a fucking $800 loan. But you know, if you make good enough money, you can go broke just through these fucking payday loans. And they wanted to step in. And, you know, those payday loan places were telling us, getting a petition going to sign it, so they didn't step in. But that was why, because without competition, when these companies that are in it to make money, when they cooperate with each other, and the way to make themselves more money, you know, if we all charge the same thing, well, then it's just going to be equal opportunity, right? If that person is closer to you, they're going to go to you, but people will go to us all, right? Whenever you have a lot of contractors, a lot of roofers in your city, you can get a roof done pretty fucking cheap. Whereas if you have only one roofing company in a small town, they can make the price, right? Or that's whenever government steps in and gives funding for certain things like that. And even in my town where there's like 100 roofing companies, the government can still step in and give you money for it. Point is though, whenever these companies cooperate with each other, then because of the lack of competition within the companies trying to get your service, then it costs you a fuckload of money for the same service when there's a city where there's a bunch of competition. You know, a lot of people think it's more gas. It costs more for gas in big cities. But when I was going to college in Ottawa, my mom used to always gas up because it was always cheaper in Ottawa, and that's because there's more gas stations. Now, there are places in Ottawa where the gas is more expensive than Cornwall, and the reason for that is because every gas station in those higher ends of town, it's richer ends of town where there's richer people, where they don't care as much. They just go to the first gas station either on the way home or the way to work, and they all got together and said, no, we're going to keep ours higher for the higher end people and pretend we give good service for the same fucking gas, and this way we make more money. And they still do that. And then the lower parts of town, it's a hell of a lot cheaper, and they're competitive with each other, and they don't talk to each other. And that's the difference. That's why cooperation can seem fucking good, but it also has a dark side. And competition can seem bad, but it also has a good side. And it all depends on what side of the coin you're on when this shit happens. But I'm going to leave it at that for today because I don't even know how long this episode is with all my recordings and there's shit I wanted to play on here. But it is what it is, and I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I'll be on tomorrow if possible. Probably not, but the next episode I'm going to hit is going to be anything I may not have hit, because I didn't talk too much about that number and what I want to do with it, or possibly my ideas of it. I just kind of rambled on about Peterson and Braden, why they're both important, and they are. So yeah, that's that. And like I said, I'm not against Braden for assuming that he did what he had to do for that time period, and now Peterson saying what he has to say for this time period. And I say listen to both and pick and choose what you need out of it, because they're both going to tell you something and help you out immensely. They have for me. And yeah, that's the show for today. I hope you enjoy and have a great fucking day.
You know, Louis C.K. a while back talked about Tiger Woods, and I really liked it because people were complaining about Tiger Woods and his affairs, and also about Arnold Schwarzenegger and his affairs. And one of the things that Louis C.K. pointed out, quite in a very comical manner, was that, well, many men aren't having the affairs of Tiger Woods. But that's not because they're good men. It's because they don't have, I think he said, a busload of Swedish bikini models waiting for them at the final hole. So the idea would be that you should conduct yourself so that you are attractive to many women. Maybe that you have your pick of them. But then you should pick one. And that's a sacrifice. Obviously, that's a sacrifice of a sort. It's a strange sacrifice because, you know, I talked to someone, a comedian recently, who told me of one of his experiences in Las Vegas. So he went to Las Vegas with a sports superstar. And they went to a party, and what literally happened at the party was one woman brought forward a small group of other women, all very attractive, and basically told the sports legend that he could just pick one of them and she would go home with him, right? And so that had all been arranged beforehand, and he said that he's been in many situations where something like that has happened. And I thought, well, you know, that sort of is appealing to the Hugh Hefner playboy 14-year-old fantasy that sort of gripped our culture from the 1960s onward. But imagine that you sleep casually with 100 women in a 6-month period, or a 3-month period for that matter, or a 3-week period. I don't care. Pick your time frame. And you say, well, what, and you're ecstatic with yourself because you've been validated by this opportunity. And I'm not making light of that. It's not nothing to be attractive to women like that. It's really something to be attracted to women like that. But it isn't obvious to me that your choice to conduct yourself in that manner enriches your life and the life of other people more in any way than picking one person and actually having a relationship with them. It's only true that that promiscuous pathway, let's say, is better if you can actually divorce sexuality from all the other elements of life. Say, well, it's about variety and it's about impulsive pleasure. Well, maybe it could be even slightly deeper than merely impulsive pleasure. It could be shared impulsive pleasure. But I don't think you can do that because sexuality isn't divorceable from family and from morality and from all the other elements of your life. And if you're mature, you know that. And so you make a decision. You make a decision not to capitalize on your opportunity, not to misuse your opportunities. And you know, a huge part of the Me Too phenomena, a huge part of this battle that's being played out in our culture is a consequence of the failure of men to recognize that. Now, it's not only the failure of men. Let me be absolutely clear about that, because, for example, with the example of the sports superstar, the women who are lining up in front of him, parading themselves and offering themselves, are deeply complicit in this pathological game. And so it's pretty clear anthropologically as well that, you know, sexual choice tends towards a Pareto distribution, especially for men. So most men have very little selection at their disposal. And a small number of men have excess opportunities. The question is, what should that small number of men do? And you might say, capitalize on it and to hell with the consequences. And like, it's a powerful argument, but I do believe it's wrong. It destabilizes the society. And so, and I also don't think it does your soul any good, because the problem with treating other people as casual sexual partners, let's say, is that you also treat yourself that way simultaneously. And I don't think that that does you any good, because you're not, unless that's what you want to be. You want to be a casual partner. So, well, I wouldn't say that's a particularly noble ambition. You should be able to do better than that.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Masterpiece Live Conference Call Network. You're listening to Antonia Hoggins, your host from www.masterpiecelife.com. And tonight I have the fun, the honor, and the privilege of having Gregg Braden back with us. Gregg is definitely one of our favorite authors. And we'll just, for those of you that have not yet had the privilege of listening to Gregg speak, I'll just give a little bit of background on Gregg so we can get right into tonight's program. Gregg, he is a New York Times bestselling author. He is internationally renowned as a pioneer in bridging science and spirituality. He has had following a successful career as a computer geologist for Phillips Petroleum during the 1970s, and he then worked as a senior computer systems designer with Martin Marietta Defense Systems during the last years of the Cold War. And then in 1991, he became the first technical operations manager for Cisco Systems, where he led the development of the global support team that ensures the reliability of today's Internet, which is, for many of you that are listening tonight, I know that you're listening via the webcast, so it's thanks to Gregg and his team that has assured the continuation of what we now know as today's Internet. Now, Gregg has searched for more than 25 years in high mountains, villages, remote monasteries all over the world to uncover texts and their timeless secrets. his work is now featured on the History Channel, Discovery Channel, the Sci-Fi Channel, ABC, and NBC. He has authored several books, such as The Isaiah Effect, The God Code, The Divine Matrix, and recently Fractal Time. And tonight we're going to be discussing with Gregg his new upcoming book that he is furiously working on right now, which is titled Deep Truth, Igniting the Memory of Our Origin, History, Destiny, and Fate. So with that, Gregg, it's so wonderful to have you back. Welcome to tonight.
I'm thrilled to be here, and that book is so new, it's sitting on my desk.
And I can't wait to get my fingers on it.
Well, it's sitting on my desk, but it's also selling on Amazon right now, which is a little daunting.
Oh, I thought it wasn't being released until the fall.
It's not. The book, actually, it's delivered to the publisher Friday of this week, and it is released publicly. I think our publisher, Hay House, will release it in September of this year. But I want to just say to you and say to our listeners, the theme of this book, I love writing this book. It's very healing for me to pull this information together. It's been over a decade in the making. And this one book is actually 5 small books woven into a single book, and it is so, the information is so timely, it's so pivotal. I simply do not want to wait until the fall to be able to share this with people. So that's why I'm very happy to be here with you tonight, and I will follow your lead if you have questions. But what I'd like to do is share the theme of this book as much as I can right now, in the relevance and the context of what's happening in our world every day. And in Toronto, this will be the crux of a very visual, extended length multimedia program. So we're going to just scratch the surface tonight of the topics that I'll be covering when I'm in Toronto with Hay House, I Can Do It.
Well, that's perfect. I think I noticed that a lot of questions coming in for tonight are very much about what is happening right now, and I think this is perfect with what you're doing. So why don't we take your lead? Sorry. Why don't we take your lead, and why don't you present Deep Truth? I know I have questions. I know our audience has questions. But why don't you start in terms of, as you said, this has been 10 years in the making.
Sure.
And we still want to hear what you have discovered as you write this book, and then we'll do some questions after.
And I'm happy to do that. And I'm going to apologize. I spoke over you. I had just a little bit of an echo happening here. And you and I have not spoken before this program, so you have people that are emailing or texting questions to you that you're going to convey to me? Is that what we'll do maybe in the second half of the program?
We have people that have emailed in questions, and when appropriate, I'll weave them into our conversation.
All right. Well, I think if anyone's on this call tonight, it's no secret, I think, to anyone with us this evening that this is no ordinary time in the history of our world, certainly not in the history of our civilization. And the essence of what we're seeing for so many people in different countries, different languages, but the theme of the comments that come to me is very similar. And the bottom line, everybody just says, it looks like the world's falling apart at the seams. What in the world is going on? And it's interesting and easy for us to see that things appear to be falling apart at the seams. And for some people, it was just when the economic crisis hit that they really woke up and said, wow, what's going on? But for many of you listening tonight, I know that you know this is much more than an economic crisis, that for the last 30 years, the indigenous people of the present time have been reminding us that their ancestors have told them for 5,000 years that we are barreling down this path toward a rare moment in the history of the earth and the history of the people of the earth. It's the convergence of many, many cycles of time that change the way we live here on earth. And our ancestors have known about this because they experienced it in their time. This is not the first time that we've gone through this convergence of cycles. It is the first time in recent memory. It's the first time in recorded history. And one of the things I find so interesting, Antonia, is that while almost universally ancient and indigenous people and texts allow for the changes, our modern Western world does not. There's no place in our worldview that allows for the cyclic change in the universe and upon our planet and within civilization that we're experiencing right now. So it's new to the people in the West. It's not new to the ancient and the indigenous peoples of the world. The cycles that I'm referring to tonight, they are triggered by Earth's location in space. And I remember when I was in school, I used to think that, Earth, it doesn't seem to me like we're moving very much. And I was surprised to learn that we were when I was in grade school. But what we now know, and modern science does tell us, is that Earth is very dynamic in heaven, in the heavens. There are multiple motions that are occurring that change and affect the way we live life here on Earth. There's the spin every day that we're familiar with, the 24-hour day-night cycle. But in addition to that spin, there's a gradual tilting back and forth that creates the seasons, and I think most of our listeners are probably familiar with that. Those are part of a wobble, a long, slow wobble, like a top. If you've ever spun a top on the floor or on your desk, you know that as it begins to slow down, it begins this long dynamic wobble. Well, Earth is going through a wobble. It is a long, slow cycle. It takes about 26,000 years to begin and end one complete wobble. And our ancestors somehow understood this wobble without having any computers or satellites or GPS, and they divided it into 5 smaller cycles of 5,125 years apiece. So 5,125 years is the length of one segment that is called a Great World Age. And the reason I'm saying that is because we are very near the end of a rare and mysterious cycle of time, completing on December 21st of the year 2012. It is a 5,125-year-long world age. It is the last of 5 of those world ages, completing this big 26,000-year wobble. And our world age began on a very precise date with an astronomical event that can be confirmed by computers today. It was on August 11th, 3114 BC. So that terminology used to mean before Christ. They're trying to get away from the religious connotations in archaeology now, but it was, so you add 2,000 years to that. So 3114 plus 2,000 years is when our cycle began. And when you work this out in terms of days, this is fascinating. It's exactly 1,872,000 days. So 1,872,000 days after August 11th, 3114 BC, we end this great world age on December 21st of the year 2012 AD. This is where this date comes from. And our ancestors are very clear. It's not the end of a world. It's the end of a world age. And what they said to us in the language of their time is precisely what we're seeing right now, is that Earth would go through changes as we near the end of this cycle, and those changes would stress the systems that we've put together to live our lives. And the systems that cannot hold up under that stress, the systems that are not sustainable under the stress of a changing world, they fall apart pretty quickly. And the ones that are sustainable seem to hold up and do well through the cycle. So the global economic collapse that we're all witnessing before our very eyes right now, I think it's a beautiful example of an unsustainable way of life. It's worked for 100 years or so, but it certainly is not sustainable in the long term. It's a system based on markets that have to get bigger and bigger, ever-expanding markets where someone generally benefits at someone else's expense. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, good, or bad. It worked well enough to get us where we are, and now it's falling apart, and we must make a choice as to whether or not we prop up an old, unsustainable way of living, or do we let it go gracefully and embrace a new way? The same thing with the way we generate electricity in the global power grid. It is based on the burning of a finite source of fossil fuel that destroys the atmosphere that we cherish. So it's worked for a little over 100 years. I'm not saying it's right, wrong, good, or bad. It is not working for us very well right now because it is being stressed. So do we prop up that system, or are we willing to embrace the new sustainable forms of energy that are now on the horizon? And these are just a couple of examples of where we are right now. The purpose of the book, the title of this book is called Deep Truth, Igniting the Memory of Our Origin, History, Destiny, and Fate. The purpose of this book is that the best minds of our time are telling us in no uncertain terms that we are facing the greatest number and magnitude of crises ever to converge on one generation in recorded history, and that we must make choices, and that we must make these choices quickly. They say we've got about 5 to 8 years to figure this out. My question is, how can we possibly make the choices that our very survival is based upon until we've answered the deepest question of our existence, and that is the question, who are we? Who are we? Our science today, the way that science is being shared in the classroom and in the media and in the textbooks and through mainstream science, many of the very powerful, very relevant discoveries that empower us in terms of our origin and our history and our past, they are simply not being allowed in the public classrooms. They're not being taught. They're not being disseminated through the media. So we are basing some of the greatest choices of our existence on obsolete science that's no longer serving us, the same science, the same beliefs that got us into the situation that we're in right now. So the book, Deep Truth, and what I'd like to share tonight, it's about the new discoveries that are so new. They're not showing up in the classroom or the textbooks on the one hand, but on the other hand, they're the very discoveries that help us to understand truly who we are. And once that becomes clear, I think the choices also become clear and the path becomes obvious. So in a nutshell, I wanted to say that before we go any further tonight, before we start taking the questions. That's what this material is all about, and that's why I'm so passionate about sharing what it is that we're sharing tonight.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, the people in our community here, we've been talking a lot about recreating our existence, and that the more people we can wake up to who we truly are, then people realize that the systems that we have endorsed for the past, 200 years or so no longer work, are obsolete, and that we do need to unite, come together, and recreate what our existence going forward was. We're now living in a time where we now have a choice of we don't really, I would almost say that we're living in a time where we no longer really have a choice, because if we choose to go with ego and greed and separation, then that will be down a path of destruction to humankind and the world, I believe. But if we can come to a point of realizing who we really are, who we are inside while we're here, and the human spirit of wanting to contribute and love and be together and come together as humankind and go forth, then we can recreate how we live, how we exist, how we create harmony with our planet, the animals on it, and ourselves. And absolutely, as you say, we are at this tipping point, this point in our history. And I'm so glad that we have been able to study that and bring it in scientific terms, because as we talked about, the spiritual leaders have been talking about this time. I've done work with the Kogi, who are the last the survivors of the Mayan people, and they too say the same thing. And yet it's so good to see someone that has a scientific background that has researched and put this together, because now we're saying, look, we're not just talking about old books and texts. We're talking about science, bridging spirituality, becoming the reality of today. So thank you for your work and the brilliant work that you're doing.
Well, you're very welcome. And this is one of those places where, the words don't really do what we're talking about justice. The whole idea of science and spirituality, where you draw the line between them, gets pretty fuzzy when you start talking about these topics, where science ends and spirituality begins, because they're languages that describe our relationship to the world, to one another, to our past, to the future. And the science is important. I was trained as a scientist, and I'm going to say right here, science does not have all the answers. And science, as good as it is incomplete. It is a way of looking at the world that began, the scientific method, we say, began about 300 years ago during the time of Isaac Newton. And that really isn't that long in terms of a belief system, 300 years. Some of the spiritual traditions have been around for 5,000 years. So science is relatively new on the one hand, but on the other hand, it is a language that we have grown to trust and rely upon in the Western world for our facts. So either consciously or subconsciously, when we ask someone, who are you? How do you work in the world? How does your body work? What is your relationship to the earth? More often than not, people rely on some scientific understanding to answer that question. And where this gets interesting is that much of the science that was developed over the last 300 years is incomplete, and it has become obsolete in light of new discoveries. However, the new discoveries are not being allowed into the textbooks, into the classrooms, and mainstream science for reasons that range from power and business and money and corporations to just pure ego, are reluctant to embrace many of the new ideas. And we're going to talk about what those ideas are here in the program tonight, so we can be specific. This is important anytime, but it's especially important now because of where, this is the context, where we are in the history of our world. The Journal of Scientific American, in September of 2005, the cover of that journal tells the whole story. It was titled Crossroads for Planet Earth. And the journal was dedicated to the viewpoints of leading scientists, engineers, social architects, spiritual leaders, religious leaders, philosophers from around the world, all coming together in one voice to say we have reached this tipping point in human existence, and we've got to make some big choices, and we're running out of time. And Scientific American felt that this was so important that they published a special edition that's online. People can still go online and read it, identifying the problems that the experts talked about. And many of them we're already familiar with, like climate and population and poverty and economic depletion and the growing shortages of food and fresh water and things like that. All of these, what makes this such a unique time is so many crises are all converging in this little window of time right at the end of this 5,000-year cycle, right when our ancestors said, and the indigenous people of the world, right when they said that these things would all come up for us. And as the systems fall apart, we have to make choices about how we move forward. If we do not change the thinking that led to the systems to begin with, what we recreate is going to lead us to the same problems again. And that's why the new discoveries, I feel, they're so important, and I'm so passionate about them. So I'm going to dive right in. Some of the discoveries, how long we've been on Earth as a civilization, for example. When I was in school back in the 60s and 70s, and if people are in school now or they have children in school, the traditional history in the West is that civilization is about 5,000, maybe 5,500 years old. That we began with, primitive grass huts near the water for resources that we needed, and we evolved over a long period of time slowly to the pinnacle of civilization that we have today. And that when we see the history timeline in a textbook, they show us the history of the world, that the most ancient civilization, they say, is formed around the area of Mesopotamia, and ancient Sumeria, 5,000, maybe 5,500 years ago. The problem with this is that the facts no longer support that history, but the facts are not being allowed into the textbooks and classrooms. New archaeological sites, peer-reviewed sites, these are not speculative, they're not a rumor on the internet. They're published in obscure scientific journals, many of them, with their peers, are now showing us that there were advanced civilizations here on Earth very near the end of the last ice age. And the last ice age, it ended 12,000 years ago, and then the weather changed, and it rained, and the ice melted, and floods occurred for about 4,000 years. And these sites are showing up, not just in one place, but they're in South America, they're in Turkey, they're in India. So right now, in the interest of time, the oldest site, I'll just go to the oldest site that we know right now. The oldest site is a site that is on a hillside in Turkey that is called Göbekli Tepe. And it is a mysterious site because much of it is still underground. The Earth imaging radar is showing us that there are probably 15 or 20 temples that are still underground, but 4 of them have been excavated. And they're now being dated, scientifically dated, to 11,300 to 11,500 years old. And that is twice as old as ancient Sumeria that we're being told in the textbooks today is the oldest civilization on Earth. There are other civilizations. Some are in Egypt. There's an entire city dating to about 9,500 years old. It's been found off of the coast of India. What makes it interesting is it's under 120 feet of water. That means it was either built underwater intentionally, which is unlikely, or it was built above ground and submerged when the sea levels rose, and that has not happened for at least the time they're looking at is right around 10,000 years ago. And it's a big city. It's 5 miles long, about 2 miles wide. So these are some of the sites that we're identifying in the book. But the key is that the facts, the scientific data that is relegated to these technical journals tells us beyond any reasonable doubt that civilization is at least twice as old as what we've been led to believe. And this is important because it means that humankind has been here with advanced knowledge, advanced understanding of mathematics and architecture and astronomy and how to grow food for at least twice as long as we've been led to believe. And that we can learn from our ancestors that went through the same cycle in their time that we're living now, when the tilt and the angle and the wobble of the earth changed, temperatures changed, the way the weather pattern changed, the way we grow food, the way we live our lives, all of those things changed. And we can learn from them the principles of what worked and what didn't. And the things that worked for them will probably work for us, and we can do a lot of. And the things that didn't work, maybe we can stop doing those things. And one of the keys that we're gleaning now from this kind of information, and this is only one of the little pieces of information that we're going to talk about tonight, but the key here is that our ancestors appeared to work together and cooperate rather than compete to get through these kinds of changes. Today we're living in a civilization that was built under a model of survival of the fittest and a model of competition. And the question is, are we making mistakes today that will lead to the downfall of our civilization during the time of the greatest crises? I don't know the answer to that, but this is something we definitely must look at. So this is one element of the book that I'll be talking about with some amazing images. We're working directly with the photographer that's documenting some the most ancient sites in the world, and those images in high resolution will be available in Toronto for our audiences there, and it's just awesome to be able to see these things.
That's just extraordinary.
Well, it is, and this is one of the ideas. Some of the other ideas that are not being allowed in the textbooks revolve around the theories of Charles Darwin. What we know is that Darwin in 1859 released his first book. It was called The Origin of Species. He was a scientist. I think he did good work. The science was good. The problem, however, is that he took some observations that he made with plants and animals, and he tried to generalize them for all life, including human. And the facts are that the data simply does not support Darwin's theories. And the new ideas, the new theories are not being allowed in the classroom, even though the old theories are no longer truly scientific. Because when the data no longer supports them, we cannot say that those are scientific ideas. So Darwin, for example, talked about survival of the fittest. Excuse me. I made the mistake of eating an almond before I came on the phone. but I also
some water or a cup of tea for that.
I also have a hot tea right here next to me, so it's all okay. Darwin's idea of survival of the fittest. There were and again, I'm doing this, I'm speaking quickly and I'm moving quickly in the interest of time tonight before we take these questions. But there are over 400 peer-reviewed, published studies asking a question about how much competition is good for a species. And all 400 have come back with precisely the same number, that 0 is the amount of competition that benefits us in the classroom, in the workplace, and the playing field. And I'm talking about violent competition. What the studies have shown is that always what's called mutual aid and cooperation, we always are far better off working together than we are competing against one another. In 1859, this idea of survival of the fittest was planted into the minds of the Western world, and became the seeds of civilization as we know it today. The way that our world is constructed over these last 150 years or so, it's based in the false assumptions of Darwinian ideas that have brought us to the brink of losing everything that we cherish right now. So people say, what difference do these ideas make? They're old ideas. They are. And they're important, because if we don't want to replicate the mistakes that lead to where we are today, we've got to reconcile the truth of these studies.
And I think also, just as you were talking, especially the recent one with Darwin, that the idea of competition has been fostered and pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. When I think when we talk about oneness, that we go back to really what we really are about is about being one and assisting and growing. And I think at times like right now, what's being happening in the world, we're seeing that we either unite and work together and assist each other to move forward, or who knows what will happen. And I think it is very important, as you say, that these studies get out into parents and into children, into society in general, where we realize, wait a minute, having built a society for the past almost 200 years based on competition is an illusion.
Well, it is, but this is where now combining, and we've only talked about two of the elements of the book that I'm going to be talking about in Toronto, but when we combine these, something even more amazing begins to happen. When I was in school, and the textbooks today tell us that competition and violence are a part of human nature, that it is the essence of our nature. They actually say it's as normal and